Chapter 1. People often say that life is black and white if you lack something. Then, as far as the eye can see, even the world is black and white. What the hell is this? The gale was howling in the pale sky. Countless ghost-like strange existences were floating among the towering ancient trees that pierced through the clouds. The grayish-white symbolizing death was boundless, covering every corner of the field of vision. None of them were normal colors. The piercing cold soaked his whole body. He wanted to shiver, but he suddenly found that the cold did not only come from the outside world, but also from within himself. Looking down at his translucent chest, listening to the faint whisper in his ears like the wind, but also like the whisper of some kind of soul, Duque felt terrible. No, it should be said that he did not even know whether he was human or not, or this could only be regarded as the whole ghost's bad. Oh, no, why did I die immediately after waking up? Duque held his head in his hands, completely unable to accept this reality. I swear on my 10 terabytes romantic action movie, I'm just a poor young man studying in a third-rate university. I haven't even held a girl's hand, and you let me die just like this. Oh my god. You're so King unfair to me. Duque went berserk and Duque cried. However, it seemed to be of some use because suddenly an electronic voice rang in Duque's ears. Congratulations, host, for successfully crossing countless light years and space barriers to cross into the balanced universe of the world of Azeroth. As a 1 in a billion successful traveler, you will receive the technical support of the strongest king assistance system. What the hell? Duque opened his mouth subconsciously, but found that he spat out a series of obscure syllables, but the owner of the voice could actually understand him. May I ask the host to name this system elf? What the hell? Although he did not want to complain, Duque instantly confirmed in his heart that this stupid system's IQ was limited. However, this system elf's prompt caught Duque's attention, and that was Azeroth. No, wait a minute before naming. I'm now in the world of Azeroth? Magical beast? It is detected that there is a game memory that is very similar to this world in the host's memory. Analyzing. After preliminary analysis, this world is 80% similar to Azeroth in the MMORPG, World of Warcraft, in the host's memory. Please find out for yourself. Alright, I finally have a preliminary understanding of my own situation. Damn it, this is a dangerous world. World war after world war. But the most important thing is, I'm going to die. I died right after I transmigrated. They were all fine and dandy when they transmigrated. If they weren't the sons of nobles, then they were the dragon-proud sky or Ka-proud sky. Why the hell am I a ghost as soon as I transmigrate? Duque couldn't help but roar. I'm sorry, but you encountered an irascible wild boar when you first arrived here. You were successfully killed by the wild boar. A gust of cold wind blew past, and Duque felt as if his young and kind heart had received 100,000 critical damage. An inexplicable echo reverberated in his chest. I was killed by a wild boar. Killed by a wild boar. Wild boar. The system elf's voice sounded again. You are now in the graveyard. Would you like to resurrect on the spot or move your soul to pick up your corpse and resurrect? Damn it. I can still resurrect. Why didn't you say so earlier? You didn't ask. The system elf seemed to want to add an element of grievance, but the monotonous mechanical voice sounded weird. Then of course I'll be on the spot. Wait. Duque wanted to resurrect on the spot immediately, but he suddenly remembered that in the game, running back to pick up corpses would cost him 10% durability. Resurrecting on the spot in the graveyard would not only cost him 25% durability, but would also cause him to be weakened for 10 minutes. Duque immediately asked, let me ask first, what's the difference between running back to the corpse and resurrecting on the spot? Detected that the host soul is missing. Evaluating the risk of death. After comparing all aspects of the host's data before and after death, it can be determined that death will cause the host to lose humanity and memory. Estimated to be 10% loss of humanity and memory for a single ordinary death. Even if you pick up a corpse to resurrect, you will permanently lose 1% of humanity and memory. Resurrecting on the spot in the graveyard will permanently lose 20% of humanity and memory. F***CK. If Duque could break out in a cold sweat, he would be drenched in sweat right now. It would have been fine if the system elf hadn't reminded him, but as soon as it did, he immediately realized that something was wrong. He had a dog that he had raised since he was a child, and only died of old age at the age of 16. At this moment he actually couldn't remember the name of his beloved dog. Things were troublesome. This wasn't the end. The system elf gave Duque a fatal blow. According to calculations, if the host loses more than 40% of humanity, most of the creatures in this world will not be willing to communicate with the host. If the host loses more than 90% of humanity, it is estimated that the host will become a low-level ghoul and wander this world forever until his body and soul are completely destroyed. A cold shiver spread through Duque's entire soul. Duque didn't immediately make a decision. He wanted to see the situation first. Relying on the faintly discernible connection between his body and soul, Duque started to run. The distance from the mass grave where he had been to his corpse wasn't far, about 300 meters. Duque arrived in no time. As soon as he entered the range, Duque was prompted by the system elf. "Do you want to revive here?" Duque didn't make a choice. He was observing. Because he had transmigrated, he was no longer the little player who sat in front of the computer with a small 19-inch monitor, using the WASD buttons and a mouse to control himself. He had truly entered this world. As for how far the timeline had progressed, Duque had no way of knowing. He only knew that Azeroth was very dangerous. In front of him was a world-shaking war between various races, behind him was the filthy demon king Arthas, that bastard who threw plagues and polluted the environment, and a large number of ancient gods who jumped out to cause trouble. If he didn't make a name for himself, not to mention 10 times, dying 100 times or even 10,000 times would be a piece of cake. Not to mention the distance, just looking at the wild boar that was as tall as an adult and had 6 blade-like fangs at the corner of its mouth, Duque knew that this world wasn't going to be easy. Duque didn't revive right away. A wild boar that was bigger than an adult rhinoceros was definitely top-notch for Duque in terms of attack power and danger. In this day and age there weren't many young people who liked to play games who were especially fit. Looking at the dense forest and rugged terrain around him, Duque knew that if he revived casually he wouldn't be able to run for more than a few steps before he was killed again. Patience. Calm down. Duque kept telling himself. After waiting for 10 minutes, Duque was depressed. Because this bastard wild boar refused to leave. Although it wasn't interested in Duque's disemboweled corpse, it just stayed nearby, digging the ground with its long fangs and refusing to leave. Just when Duque was at his wits' end, a beautiful and vigorous elf entered Duque's field of vision. Even though her image was different from the one in the game, Duque recognized her at a glance. The most famous High Elf Ranger General in World of Warcraft, Aurelia Windrunner. Chapter 2. Looking at Aurelia, Duque immediately thought of a key problem. The timeline. Aurelia's existence itself indicated a very, very serious problem. According to the history of Azeroth, Aurelia was active in the world of Azeroth before the first war between the humans and the orcs at the Dark Portal. In the game before Duque transmigrated, Aurelia had already been remembered as a missing hero. There was even a large statue of her at the gate of the humans' Stormwind capital, Stormwind City. So, I've transmigrated to the time before the First Orc War? Duque immediately realized what he had to do after his resurrection. The worst-case scenario was that the Orc army was about to pass through the Dark Portal and invade the world of Azeroth. If the place he was at was about to be engulfed in the flames of war, then he had to accumulate his strength and prepare for a great war. At the very least he had to become a strong person who could protect himself. But then again Aurelia was very beautiful. For some reason when Duque focused all his attention on Aurelia, the system automatically operated. Beep. As per your wish, restoring the target's color. Like a black and white painting being filled in at high speed, the pale gray disappeared. Colors began to fill in along every line of the body and clothes. This feeling was like a black and white animation becoming a living movie. In less than a second, the Aurelia in front of him suddenly became a normal existence. As a superhuman character in the game, Aurelia also had a stunning appearance in reality. This female elf was filled with the heroic aura of a Valkyrie from head to toe. Because she was born into a noble high elf family, even though she was a ranger, she occasionally had a noble and elegant demeanor. Other than a green cloak that fluttered in the wind, she only had a green pauldron and a bikini-like inner armor. Coupled with her brilliant golden hair, it made her ivory skin look even whiter and more delicate. Her well-trained body had the most perfect curves. Her snow-white neck was as slender as a white swan's, and her collarbone was slender and sexy. Her slender waist accentuated the pair of hydral peaks on her chest. Not to mention the high elves who were famous for their slender figures, even humans would be considered a violation of the rules. There was no need for a waistband at all. That healthy and beautiful waist looked so slender because of the large amount of exercise. That slim waist, because of the existence of the healthy and beautiful mermaid lines, made people not worry about the waist breaking if they used too much strength. On her lower body she wore a pair of green boots with gold trimmings, which made her proud figure look even more slender and slender. Her whole body was filled with a kind of strong exotic charm and speechless sexiness. Before he transmigrated, he had seen so many internet celebrities with snake-like faces and chests filled with silicone that even his own mother would not be able to recognize. Suddenly seeing such a natural and heroic woman, Duque was a little dumbfounded. If he was still breathing, his breathing rate would be similar to that of a bellows. It was an irresistible attraction. Duque reached out his hand to Aurelia. In the next moment he immediately realized what the system meant by losing his humanity. He actually floated over and clawed at Aurelia's peaks. Duque was immediately dumbfounded. His mind only had the thought of, that pair of flesh mountains are too evil, it would be great if I could just grab one, and his soul immediately acted. Is this what a cultured, law-abiding and principled youth should do? So losing his humanity was losing his moral integrity. Time seemed to have stopped and Duque felt like crying on the spot. This was not the end. Duque's nightmare had just begun. He was actually discovered. It was obvious that something called murderous intent was rushing towards Duque. Aurelia turned back with extreme agility. When Duque clearly saw what Aurelia was holding in her hand after turning over, Duque was dumbfounded again. In the blink of an eye, Aurelia had already taken out the green longbow on her back. He did not know when, but 3 white feather arrows were already tightly gripped in her hand. The 3 silver-white arrowheads gave Duque a sense of destructive threat. Duque had never thought about why Aurelia could see him in his soul state. Oh damn. This was a King fantasy world. Anything that was not scientific was not unusual. Suddenly the system's mechanical voice sounded. It has been detected that Aurelia Windrunner is extremely hostile to you. Loading the boss template. It is estimated that she has at least 100 skills. The threat rating is the highest, Red Skull. It is recommended that you immediately surrender or escape. Otherwise, if she destroys you again in the soul state, you may suffer more than 50% of your soul loss. At this moment, 10,000 alpacas running wildly in his heart were not enough to describe Duque's feelings. Why the hell did people who had traveled to Azeroth, if they were not high elf nobles or the sons of human grand dukes, and I died as soon as I transmigrated? And I immediately provoked one of the strongest female heroes in the Alliance camp? Duque suddenly remembered such a statistic. According to the evaluation of busybodies, if an ordinary college-level animal transmigrated to a fantasy world, more than 99% of the college-level animal would die on the first day. There was no other reason such as not adapting, not smart enough, or bad luck. If Duque had hesitated for a second, it was estimated that Duque would have become one of the 99%. But Duque was still smart. He stopped in his tracks and the hand in front of him suddenly moved down. Then the gesture immediately changed from the worst perverted hand to a beckoning gesture. Huh. Aurelia frowned. From this heroine's reaction, Duque was absolutely sure that she could see him. Please allow Duque to get on top of his body, put on a sad expression, and then pointed in the direction of his body. Duque did not believe that with Aurelia's keen perception, she could not sense the damn killer wild boar not far away. Did that wild boar kill you? Aurelia asked tentatively. When there was no more murderous intent, Duque found that Aurelia's voice was quite pleasant, reminding him of the oriole in the forest. Aurelia spoke in the human language. Originally, Duque could not understand, but the system's translation software made him instantly understand. Duque really wanted to say, yes. But when the words reached his mouth, they became a murmur of the soul like a piece of noise, so he could only nod. Aurelia sighed slightly and then released the bowstring. Thump. The crisp and sweet sound of the bowstring had a strange sense of beauty. In the next second, Duque's heart almost flew out of his body. Because 3 arrows with green flames, which seemed to be able to kill gods and demons, were actually shooting at him at high speed. God. This woman still does not believe me. Is she even going to destroy my soul? It was completely indescribable that even his soul was about to freeze, and Duque completely lost the strength to move. But nothing happened to him. The arrows were not shooting at him and he just happened to be next to the arrow's trajectory. Or rather, this woman was deliberately scaring him, scaring a ghost. The arrows that were shot out in a triangular formation brushed past his body and then tore through the air, making a beautiful arc in the forest, passing over countless trees that could serve as obstacles and shooting into the distance. Where was she shooting at? Although he knew that it was a bit impossible, Duque had a hunch. Ow! There was a mournful cry from a pig in the distance. Duque was dumbfounded. No way that's possible. For the first time, Duque had the most intuitive understanding of the boss-level heroes in the world of Azeroth. Crazy, cool, and domineering. Chapter 3. No need to thank me, I'm just getting rid of an evil beast for the other animals in the forest. You can go to heaven in peace. Since she said that, Duque knew that this short conversation should end here. In his soul form, he placed his right hand on his left shoulder and bowed to Aurelia. Aurelia nodded and disappeared into the forest in a flash. Phew, Duque let out a long sigh of relief. Alright, it's time to pick up my lost moral integrity. Shaking his head, Duque sprinted to the vicinity of his corpse and saw the huge wild boar that had fallen. 2 arrows accurately pierced through the wild boar's eyes and went straight through its brain, while the 3rd arrow was stuck in its throat. Hiss, Duque sucked in a cold breath. What terrifying archery. Fortunately, he was quick-witted, otherwise the 3 arrows wouldn't have hit the wild boar. The system elf's voice sounded again. You found your lost moral integrity. Oh, it's the corpse. Do you want to resurrect now? Please, your joke isn't funny at all. Then, do I want to resurrect? Nonsense. Of course I want to resurrect. As he clicked yes on the pop-up window in front of him, the scenery around him rapidly changed. Duque could clearly see that his miserable corpse, which had its intestines cut open by the wild boar, immediately turned into a stream of light, disintegrating completely in a few seconds, not even leaving a trace of blood. All the light began to converge on Duque's soul. Duque could feel that his body was filled to the brim. The most important thing was that the moral values that seemed to have become faint had returned. The lost moral integrity had returned. Looking at the world that had become colorful again, listening to the birds around him, smelling the fragrance of the earth. For the first time in his life, Duque felt that it was good to be alive. He really wanted to laugh out loud, but looking at the Soul Power 99 and Humanity 99% labels in the system notification, Duque's happiness faded. Right, I'm alive now. My journey to the other world has officially begun, right? Then how do I become strong enough to protect myself before the Dark Portal incident arrives? The goal was clear, but the process was confusing. It seems that before I become a powerhouse, is there a novice gift pack? Duque, who was used to wearing modern industrial clothes, could not get used to the rough linen clothes he was wearing. Dreams were plentiful, but reality was harsh. Duque touched his body and found that he was penniless. His pockets were completely empty. Unknowingly, Duque cast his gaze towards the vicious beast that killed him. Such a big wild boar, it's definitely not some Tom, Dick or Harry. I remember you can sell the skin for money in the game, right? Duque immediately discovered the problem. *CK, do you want me to skin it with my bare hands? Left with no choice, he could only give up. Duque was a little depressed as he walked blindly for about 10 minutes. Suddenly he heard the sound of water in the river. Since ancient times where there was water there were often people living. It should be, right? After a few steps along the river, Duque's foot slipped. He actually slipped into the river. Duque, who was being carried downstream by the river, didn't know that when he reached the river, Aurelia's strong and beautiful figure suddenly appeared next to the dead wild boar. For some reason she instinctively felt that something was wrong. After walking for a while she decided to turn back to check and retrieve the arrow. When she arrived at the scene she immediately found that something was wrong. There was only the wild boar and her arrow. The smell of human blood that she smelled just now was gone. Looking at the traces of a fierce struggle on the ground, the Ranger General was absolutely sure that there was a human sacrifice here. However, there was no corpse fragments, not even blood, and no traces of any other living beings passing by. What the hell is that? Aurelia buried deep doubts in her heart. Immediately Aurelia smiled, like a spring flower blooming on her beautiful face. Right. She was in high spirits. On the planet Azeroth that Duque came from, it was mainly composed of two continents, the continent of Kalimdor in the west and the continent of the Eastern Kingdom in the east. About 9,000 years ago, a group of high elves were exiled from the continent of Kalimdor to the Eastern Kingdom because they were unwilling to give up their precious magic. They traveled to the northern part of the continent, Cultivation Salis, and re-established their civilization there. For thousands of years, Cultivation Salis had always been considered a place where magic gathered. A source of magic called the Sunwell provided every high elf with an inexhaustible source of energy. These high elves used the power of nature to obtain immortal life and power. Therefore the high elves were a race with immortal life. It was not a problem for them to live for tens of thousands of years. However, a long life had both advantages and disadvantages. The advantage was that they had endless time to squander. The downside was that he had experienced too many things and knew almost everything. This was undoubtedly a kind of torture for the Windrunner, who loved new things and liked to wander around. If it was a state of war, as the Ranger General of the High Elves' Kingdom of Cultivation Salis, Aurelia could not leave her post without permission. However, she was on vacation and came here after wandering around. It seems, there is finally something interesting. Aurelia's beautiful face was filled with ecstasy, dominated by curiosity. Ranger, an expert in guerrilla warfare, the favorite of the forest, one of the strongest trackers. Aurelia jumped to the top of a big tree. It did not take her long to find Duque's footprints. Oh. The first footprint is more than 40 yards away from the original position of the corpse? Aurelia's smile became wider. It was the expression of someone who had found a fun toy. Her feet barely touched the ground. The agile Ranger General dashed across the big and small branches. She was so fast that she could be called a phantom. After a while she came to the river. She had lost track of Duque. The river was full of pebbles. It was difficult to leave footprints on the pebbles unless one deliberately stepped on them. He knows some anti-reconnaissance skills. It was difficult to leave footprints, but it did not mean that there were no footprints at all. The weight of an adult on the pebbles would still cause some changes. Aurelia followed a few steps and was surprised to find that the footprints had disappeared. Could it be that he was so stupid that he was washed away by the water? Aurelia quickly sketched another scene in her mind. A mysterious man pretended to walk downstream to avoid being tracked, but after a few steps he quickly stepped into the deeper water and went upstream. Aurelia really misunderstood Duque. At this moment she immediately thought that Duque was many times more cunning. The beautiful figure of the high elf suddenly disappeared from the river and sprinted upstream. Chapter 4. Neither Duque nor Aurelia knew that after they left, a third group of people found the wild boar. "Isn't that Prince?" a servant exclaimed in surprise. "Prince?" A young man dressed like a nobleman snorted in disdain. The servant immediately lowered his head and bowed. Honorable master, that's just a nickname. The Blackwell family has a prize-winning pig called Princess. This sow is huge and often sneaks into Stonefield's farm to steal vegetables. This princess has a bigger killer boar at some point in time, and 3 farmers have already died to this boar. So on the bounty this boar is called Prince. The young nobleman heard this and became interested. If I bring this prince back, won't it increase my prestige? The servants were all flatterers. They immediately understood what he meant when they heard it. The current king was a very wise man. In order to maintain the nobleman's ambition, he even set an iron law that the descendants of noblemen must have meritorious deeds to inherit their father's title. Unfortunately, there were policies and countermeasures. In this era without large-scale wars, people's lives were relatively peaceful, and there were not many robbers or robbers. The only ones that could be counted as enemies of humans were the wild beasts, magical beasts and demi-human races that covered the mountains and plains. If humans wanted to expand their territory, they had to snatch territory from other creatures and open up new territories. So, killing the monsters on the bounty could also be counted as meritorious deeds. Yes, that's right. Young master, you used magic to beautifully kill the prince on the level 1 bounty in town. You will definitely win the favor of the viscount. Seeing that the servant was so obedient, the young nobleman smiled proudly. Duque was completely unaware of the series of events that happened behind him. He was still struggling to survive. When he finally climbed out of the slightly turbulent river, he was shocked to find that he had already been washed far away. He lay on the riverbank, gasping for breath, feeling the sun behind him. The system suddenly spoke. "Dear host, this system elf feels obligated to remind you. With your physique, the probability of you catching a cold is 68.3%. Duque clenched his teeth and finally agreed. He struggled to take off his coarse linen clothes and lay down on a large rock by the river that was relatively dry. Then he lay down on it like a dead dog. Damn it, as expected, transmigration was a physical and technical work. Such a primitive natural environment was indeed very difficult for a university animal who complained about the hardships of military training. His mind was a mess. Duque recalled everything in the world of Azeroth. Suddenly he smiled bitterly. Before he transmigrated, he had always complained that his reincarnation in the otherworld was like activating hell mode. Compared to Azeroth, it was not even the gates of hell. There was a saying that it was rare for anyone to live past the age of 40 during the war. Holding his forehead, Duque muttered to himself, "There's still too little information." The only thing he knew was that if Aurelia was still around, this should be a relatively early time for Azeroth. In the world of Warcraft, Aurelia should have gone missing after she went on an expedition to the Outland with Turalyon. When he finally caught his breath, Duque stood up and put on his clothes again. He looked around and finally found what he was looking for: smoke. Where there was fire, there would be humans. Well, at least human-like creatures. Duque was filled with hope and apprehension as he walked towards the place where the smoke was rising. Finally, after half an hour, Duque followed the stream and found what he was looking for: a human settlement. A few 4-story brick and wood buildings broke through the canopy, proudly declaring the existence of human civilization to the nature. For some reason, when he saw the extremely ordinary chevron-shaped roof, Duque felt like crying. He felt like he had found his home. At least he found a human town and not an ogre barbecue. Filled with excitement, Duque quickened his pace. Soon he found a mudstone road. The road was covered with gravel and there was almost no space for plants other than grass. The feeling of walking on it couldn't compare to the sidewalk before he transmigrated, but it was much better than the complicated terrain in the forest. Looking from afar, a large number of trees had been chopped down, leaving behind a large empty space. The area near the forest was filled with cultivated land, and in the middle of the cultivated land was the town, bustling with activity. All he could see were farmhouses in Western European style. A taller and larger white building with black edges stood in the middle of the farmhouses like a crane in a flock of chickens. Colorful flags were hung on the ancient brick and wood houses, and even the roofs of the thatched cottages were replaced with new and clean grass. There was noise and cheering everywhere. After passing through the forest and the last stretch of mudstone road in the town, Duque saw 2 smiling guards in front of the town. Their armor was silver with blue trim. Their breastplate and shields were decorated with a golden lion emblem on a blue background. This was a typical Stormwind City Guard uniform that could not be any more typical. Unlike the stainless steel armor that was polished, sculpted, and molded by machines in the movies, or the rough handmade armor in cosplay, the guard's armor gave Duque a very real feeling. Looking at the dense forest in front of him, anything related to Stormwind City could only make Duque think of the Elven Forest. As the gateway to Stormwind City and the main residential area of Stormwind City, this place should be relatively safe and there shouldn't be many battles. But what did Duque see? Armor covered in big and small scars. There were scratches, small holes from sharp weapons and bumps from blunt weapons, but the armor was still well maintained. Small pieces of rust were smoothed out and large pieces of damage were filled with iron pieces and hammered into shape. Coupled with the uneven color of the hand carbized, a series of small details not only gave the armor a supreme texture. It also told Duque one thing: danger. Even in the most peaceful elven forest in the game, there were still dangers that Duque didn't know about. For some reason, Duque thought of the beasts in the beginner's area and the various monsters that he looked down on. Regardless, seeing them, Duque still let out a long sigh of relief. Phew. In the world of Azeroth, there used to be a very powerful human empire called Arothar. But in the game's history around 1,200 years ago, the Arothar Empire was split into 7 small countries: Lordaeron, Dalajan, Alterac, Kull, Tiraz, Gilnis, Torrential Fort and Stormwind City. Stormwind City was the beginner's area for all human players in the game. Duque didn't know if the history here was the same, but it didn't seem to be any different. Yo bro, are you here for the profession trial too? Looks like your small body can't be a guard of Stormwind City. Huh. Seeing Duque, the guard on the left laughed straightforwardly. Maybe he's a hunter and can become an archer? The guard on the right laughed as well. No. Look at his white and tender palms. Maybe he's a noble master mage. Huh. Duque didn't know what profession he could take, but he knew that if he didn't do anything he would sooner or later become a ghoul in this world full of war and destruction. But, no matter how down and out I am, it's not your turn to laugh at me, you two silly soldiers. Just as Duque was about to punch the two of them, a military officer with golden eyebrows, a square face and a large sword at his waist came. Enough. Shut up, you two idiots. Seeing their superior, the two guards immediately shut up and stood at attention. A drop of cold sweat could be clearly seen dripping down their cheeks. The military officer faced Duque and smiled warmly. Whether a person is noble or not depends on whether you or your ancestors have contributed to the prosperity of mankind. Becoming a professional and advancing to the elite level is a good thing, but if you fail, don't be discouraged. The prosperity of Stormwind City requires talents from all walks of life. Young man, do you think I'm right? Yes. The military officer extended his hand to Duque. I'm Viry, Vice Captain. Duque. Duque also extended his hand to shake Viry's. Then, Duque's palm received 100 points of critical damage. F***CK. This guy's hand strength is so strong. Alright, Duque, welcome to the Northshire Abbey trial field. I hope you can become a professional. I sincerely hope that mankind can have more elites. Duque entered just like that. Viry looked at Duque's back and rubbed his chin. This young man isn't made for a warrior. Chapter 5. After entering, Duque was a bit puzzled. Just like in World of Warcraft, there were many recruitment points for different classes. However, unlike in 3D games, this was a real world. The warrior recruitment point had the most people. Looking at the warrior examiners and candidates, all of whom had arms thicker than Duque's thighs, Duque knew that he had no chance. Was this a gathering of the devil's muscular men? Anger. To become a warrior you must sense anger first. It's not the anger of someone stabbing you in the butt with a knife. It's the anger that you can sense when it's turned into energy. The examiner yelled loudly. Duque thought, anger? I have a perverted heart. Does that count as anger? The hunter exam wasn't something that a college animal like Duque could handle. Shooting an apple from 30 yards away with a bow and arrow? Except for the archery team of the sports school, which college animal had ever touched a bow and arrow? Rogues weren't reliable either. It was a test of agility. Just like the wave-like subtle steps, they could fly across a river that was more than 10 meters wide by relying on 3 small stones at different distances above the water. What was even more ridiculous was that a few guys actually did it. If it were before Duque traveled to this world, these guys could go on TV shows like water parks and win big prizes. However, this was only the entry trial for novice thieves. At this moment, Duque's mind was filled with countless thoughts. Even though he knew a lot about the future of the world of Azeroth, he couldn't use it carelessly. If he was in a low position, no one would listen to him. At the very least, he had to get a high position. Unfortunately, it was extremely difficult to integrate into this fantasy world that was similar to the European Middle Ages. Suddenly, there was a clamor, and Duque seemed to hear people cheering, "Salute Sir Brando who killed the ferocious wild boar prince for the people." The crowd was excited. The young people from other places were still a little confused, but all the locals gathered around him excitedly, giving their best wishes to the noble young master surrounded by the crowd. There were so many people that Duque couldn't see what the young master looked like. However, it didn't prevent Duque from seeing the wild boar skin that was held high by 4 servants on a wooden shelf. As if struck by lightning, Duque's mind was in a daze. Wasn't this boar the Lord Boar who had killed him not long ago and was then killed by Illyria with a gorgeous 3 arrows strike? Honorable Sir Brando, how did you kill this ferocious giant wild boar? Someone asked loudly. Immediately, Duque heard a sharp male voice. Haha. I'm a once-in-a-century magic genius. A mere wild boar can be killed with a fireball. Someone immediately echoed, That's right. That's right. Sir Brando is a wizard genius. He has passed the magic trial and become a member of the Stormwind City Royal Magic Academy. Praise Sir Brando, the crowd shouted in unison. I've seen shamelessness. I've never seen such shamelessness. Duque was very unhappy to hear such a blatant claim of credit. This wild boar that killed me was clearly killed by the demon queen Aurelia. What does it have to do with a damn noble like you? But there was someone else who was even more infuriated. A slim figure hidden in the treetops snorted coldly. She glanced at Duque, who didn't react. She was still sulking when she was just led away, but now she immediately thought that this might be an opportunity to force Duque to show his true abilities. Looking at the holy medicine in her hand that could save people as long as they had a breath left, she secretly spat. At worst, I'll come back and save you. The next second, a voice that was 70% similar to Duque's came with the wind. Sir Brando's fireball is really amazing. 2 fireballs shot into the prince's eyeballs like arrows, and one hit the prince's throat. There are fatal wounds everywhere. Look, there are no burn marks on the prince's fur. Sir Brando is so awesome. As soon as the voice came out, the crowd was dead silent. Everyone's necks seemed to have instantly become rusty machines. They struggled to twist their necks and looked at the almost perfect wild boar skin. Most of the people were ignorant. They blindly worshipped the powerful pharaoh who used mysterious power, but as long as they thought about it carefully, they would understand why a fireball couldn't burn the wild boar skin. In fact, such a clumsy act of falsely claiming credit was not unnoticed. But it was already the norm for nobles to falsely claim credit, and those with a bit of brain chose to be silent. After all, it wasn't a crime to fool the ignorant subjects. But a hothead revealed the truth, and there was no way to clean up the mess. In fact, when Duque heard this voice, he already felt that something was wrong. What made him feel the most inexplicable was when he saw a system notification. You have been affected by a powerful mysterious person who used the skill, mislead, on you. The threat value that was previously caused to Brando will all be transferred to you. What the hell is this? Mislead can be used like this? This is not logical. At this moment, Duque knew he had been tricked. Although he immediately realized who was tricking him, the problem was, at this moment, where could he find a river to jump into to clear his name? Duque's face instantly turned pale. And Brando easily used mislead to produce a telepathic connection with him, and immediately saw Duque in the crowd. What are you saying? You lowly commoner, are you saying that I, Sir Brando, who has the bloodline of Thoradin the Great, am lying and claiming credit? The crowd suddenly parted like a tide, revealing the main character that Duque had pushed to the highest point of the storm. It was a blonde young man with an all-shaped face and a mean face. He was glaring angrily at Duque with his eyes open. The bloodline of Thoradin the Great was just a common way for the nobles to flatter themselves. There was only one person who was truly recognized by the nobles as having the bloodline of Thoradin the Great, and his name was Anduin Lothar. In fact, when the Elven Ranger General spoke, Duque had the idea of leaving decisively. But for some reason, when the Elven General said what he wanted to say but did not dare to say, Duque felt that the resentment in his heart had been vented a lot. He did not know why Aurelia was here, but since she refused to let Brando claim credit, if he shrank back she would hate him, right? Even though she unkindly tricked him with mislead. Besides, was Aurelia the Great Demon King more powerful? Or was it just a piece of sh*t Brando he had never heard of who was more powerful? Even if he thought with his toes he would know. It seemed impossible to curry favor with both sides. So, Duque decisively chose to increase his reputation with Aurelia the Great Demon King. Duque also smiled and looked at the young noble named Brando without fear. No, I just want to see how the great genius mage Brando can throw a fireball as small as an arrow and kill such a big wild boar in seconds. Of course Brando could not do it. If he could do it, he would at least be at the level of a high-level mage. His all-like face suddenly swelled to the color of a pig's liver, and he almost shouted at the top of his voice, "Lowly commoner, you are not even a professional, you don't even have the right to question me." At this time Vice Captain Viry, who had just helped Duque, came near Duque and whispered, "Sorry, Duque, commoners have no right to question any action of the nobles, because the commoners themselves are the property of the Lord. I don't know where you come from, and I don't know why your parents did not mention the general laws of this human kingdom to you. But I have to remind you, offending a noble is not a rational thing to do." Duque's body trembled. He seemed to feel Aurelia staring at him and immediately asked in a low voice, "Do you want me to yield to that bastard?" Vice Captain Viry's eyes dimmed. "Child, honesty is a rare virtue. I don't want to hurt you, but the truth is, outside of Northshire Abbey I can't guarantee your safety. And Brando has the double identity of a noble and a mage apprentice. Even the ordinary nobles will not choose to go against him." Chapter 6. At this moment, a few of Brando's servants had already approached them aggressively. Brando angrily put his hands on his hips, raised his chin and looked down at Duque with disdain. He really wanted to know who gave this lowly commoner in tattered clothes the guts to question his reputation in front of everyone. Vice Captain Viry was also anxious. "Child, if there's no other way, I suggest you kneel and kowtow to admit your mistake." "Kneel? Kowtow? Faster thief. What the hell is this?" Hearing this, Duke's lungs were about to explode. Unknowingly, he had subconsciously accepted the blame. As a transmigrator, as a young man who had been educated by modern and enlightened ideas, Duque had never had the habit of kneeling to anyone. Maybe one day in the future when he got rid of his single status and wanted to marry a wife he might even kneel. That's right. Kneel to the sky. Kneel to the ground. Kneel to his parents. But I won't kneel to a *ty noble like you. If Duque was a little reluctant to be tricked by Aurelia at the beginning, then at this moment, Duque was completely immersed in his role. Anyway, he didn't like Brando. Duque made up his mind. What can a *ty noble like you do to me? Anyway, I'll be resurrected. At most I'll just lose some integrity and kill you later. However, being beaten to death would probably hurt a lot. Duque went all out. He gritted his teeth and yelled, "So what if you're a noble? If you say the sun is black, then it's black. I'm not convinced. If you have the ability to smash a fireball into an arrow, then..." It was Kuel Salas's High Elf Ranger General Aurelia Windrunner who killed this wild boar. How dare you take credit for it? Hearing Duque's words, the surrounding people were in an uproar. Even Brando's scalp was a little numb. Why did that bunch of arrogant long-ears get involved? This could be an international dispute. Humans and the High Elves were allies, but that didn't mean that they were on equal footing. The High Elves had a transcendent status. Back then, if the High Elves had not taught humans magic, humans might not have been able to defeat the various beasts, trolls, and other humanoid tribes. Not everyone present knew who Aurelia was, but there was no lack of knowledgeable people. At this time, an old man's voice came from behind Duque. "Yo, young man, do you want to try your mage aptitude test? If you become a mage apprentice, you will have the same status as Sir Brando." Duke turned around and saw a crystal ball on a table, and an old mage who looked like a priest waving at him. Mage? Duque's heart skipped a beat. In the game he was an out-and-out pharaoh. In fact, he loved to use mages, warlocks, and priests as long as they were cloth-armored classes. But could the things in the game be the same as in real life? Could it be that if he assumed Ultraman's right-angle slash stance he would be able to release a big fireball with a bayou 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 sound? Even though it was ridiculous, Duque still went over. At this time Brando warned him fiercely, "Peasant, do you really think a mage apprentice can protect you? Do you know what you are doing? You are not only slandering me, Fame Brando, but you are also provoking the entire Brando family." Viry panicked and whispered quickly, "Duque, don't. Mage aptitude is extremely rare. There might not even be one mage apprentice out of 1,000 civilians, let alone a high-level mage. To fight against the Brando family, you have to at least become a court mage in Stormwind City." Duque gave Viry a grateful look, turned around and walked straight to the old mage. When a servant saw Duque like this, he immediately scolded, "Bastard, stop right there. How dare you ignore Brando?" Brando stopped his servant instead. "Let him go." "Young master, but, haha, do you think you can have mage aptitude just because you say so? Among those peasants who can't even read, there might not even be one in 100,000. Ha." Brando's maniacal laughter reached the ears of the surrounding civilians. Every civilian's face was filled with hesitation and unwillingness. On one hand, they longed for a young hero to appear, to prove to these arrogant nobles that there could also be talents among the civilians, geniuses. On the other hand, they were very clear that this hope was too slim. Putting aside the completely unimaginable magic aptitude, just the runes and magic theories alone were enough to make them want to die. One by one, the civilians wanted to say something but stopped, silently watching Duque. disdain, maniacal laughter, not being looked upon favorably by the world. Feeling the pitiful gazes from the people around him, Duque's chest was filled with an emotion called resentment. Layer after layer piling up higher and higher, accumulating more and more like a volcano that was about to erupt. Duque clenched his teeth and asked word by word, "What do I want to do?" Completely ignoring Fame Brando's hostile gaze, the old man spoke. "This crystal ball contains the most basic magic formula for the fireball spell. Do you know what a formula is?" Forget it, anyway, just use your mind to sense it. As long as you can use this crystal ball to create a spark, you will be the lowest level of magic apprentice. Sense it? Behind him was the noble young Master Brando and his lackeys, who were itching to tear him into pieces. With Duque's small physique, there was no way he could beat them. Forget it, try it as a last resort. Duque put his hand on the crystal ball. The moment he put his hand on it, the terrible voice of the system elf sounded again. Unknown magic model detected. Comparing with the host's knowledge. Importing thermodynamics and hydrodynamics formulas. Calculating entropy value. Improved magic model constructed. Importing heat energy from the fire elemental realm. Under the horrified gaze of the old man, under the inexplicable shock of Duque, and under the horrified expressions of all the onlookers, ribbon-like crimson runes suddenly sprang out of the crystal ball and wrapped around Duque, forming rings that kept spinning. The next moment, a fireball the size of a water tank, burning fiercely and emitting horrifying heat energy, flew out of the crystal ball with a long trail of flames behind it. Boom! The unimaginably loud explosion numbed the scalps of nearly 1,000 people in the trial field, and their ears buzzed. Oh, holy light above! What happened? Of course, the people nearby could see it, but countless people in the distance who didn't know the situation screamed. "Get out of the way! Get out of the way! Unrelated people, please evacuate. We might be under attack." One had to admit that the quality of the guards in Stormwind City was pretty good. Upon hearing the sudden explosion, their first reaction was for the guards to stay at their posts. The patrol team rushed to the scene, and the soldiers who were resting rushed out of their resting rooms to evacuate the crowd. Another deputy captain arrived at the scene with a patrol team of 12 fully armed people. Chapter 7. What was the result? There were no murderers to be seen, only 2 black men and the scarecrow that was placed on the empty ground as a symbolic target were all reduced to dust. Not far away, Vice Captain Viry was dumbfounded. His mouth was so wide open that an egg could fit in it. A little further away were Sir Fame Brando and his servants, who were paralyzed on the ground in fear. "Oh my God, what did I just see?" Viry could not believe his eyes. His former captain had once told him that if he was an outstanding wizard, he could use the crystal ball to release a fireball and turn a scarecrow into dust. What did he just see? A row of 10 scarecrows were all gone. The ground was covered in black ash and a small amount of dried grass that had not been completely burnt. Cough, cough, cough. The 2 fellows, one old and one young, were coughing violently. Both of them were choking on the thick smoke brought by the fire. "Sasha." The old wizard called out to his assistant, his voice filled with unspeakable ecstasy. "Inform old Mike to bring me that bottle of wine that I have treasured. I found a treasure." "Treasure? What treasure?" The assistant, who had rushed over in a panic, was a little confused. Old man Norton pulled Duque, who was still in a state of confusion. "He is a great wizard that only appears once in 1,000 years, no, once in 10,000 years. Wow." In an instant, the entire Northshire Abbey's training grounds were in an uproar. Regardless of the era, soldiers who did not need talent and only relied on a body full of muscles were the most common. On the contrary, the more skills and talent were needed, the rarer the profession. Regardless of which profession, mages were extremely rare, to the point that they were as rare as phoenix feathers and unicorn horns. Almost at the moment the old man made the announcement, Duque could feel that everyone was looking at him differently. Most of them were envious, a few were jealous, but there was also respect. Duque's ears were a mess, but he still understood the gist of it. As long as he became an official wizard, he would be the equivalent of a noble. In the future he would even have his own fiefdom, his own wizard tower, and so on. The 2 guards who once looked down on him were dragged over by Vice Captain Viry and begged for Duque's forgiveness like dogs. Of course, the one who was most shocked was Fame Brando. After the initial shock, His face immediately turned from shock to ashen because he heard a sentence. Kid, from this moment onwards, you are the highest grade 9 wizard apprentice in Stormwind City Royal Magic Academy. Yes, I will apply for special treatment for you. In this way you can enjoy the same benefits as a knight. What? Impossible. In Brando's eyes, Duque's handsome face was even more detestable and hideous than the most hideous ghoul. Brando couldn't believe his ears. 9th grade aptitude. What was 9th grade aptitude? Every commoner was talking wildly, describing what had just happened to their companions in whispers, which led to waves of screams. I didn't hear it wrong, did I? That kid called Duque won the bet? You didn't hear it wrong. Duque defeated the kid from Brando's family in one fell swoop in the wizard apprentice trial. 9th grade aptitude. That's completely above Brando's 5th grade aptitude. Yes, a commoner kid defeated the noble Brando. This is unbelievable. If that's the case, then little brother Duque has entered the Royal Wizard Academy in Stormwind City? Wow, now that you mention it, it seems like since the founding of Stormwind City, Duque is the first person to enter the Wizard Academy as a commoner. A muscular young man said excitedly, Duque is too powerful, this won't do. When he graduates from the Wizard Academy, I want to be his follower. You still have to wait for Sir Duque to graduate? I suggest you get in touch with him as soon as possible. 9th grade aptitude, maybe he'll be the next court wizard of Stormwind City. Tisk, look at the glowing eyes of the surrounding ladies, they want to swallow Duque into their stomachs. A large group of lads were shouting wantonly, venting the excitement in their hearts. Chapter 8. Countless innocent girls threw flirtatious glances at Duque, who was still in a daze, showing off their youthful beauty. As an annual trial, of course, it was not just the examiners. There were also many older students who had successfully entered the various academies who came to help out. These warrior academies, thief academies. The first-year and second-year students of the various academies were all shocked. Amateurs enjoyed the show while experts appreciated the artistry. For example, the assistant of the old mage who had just arrived, the female mage apprentice Xianxia, was shocked to the point where she felt like her soul had been shattered. How is this possible? This power is already comparable to Flame Blast. Junior Duque actually used the spell model of a fireball to create the effect of Flame Blast. This is a mage apprentice? I'm afraid many official mages can't do this. Heavens, if this gets out, I don't know how many people's glasses would be shattered and how many people's hearts would be broken. Genius. No wonder the teacher said that he is a true genius that only appears once in 10,000 years. What the hell, even a middle-ranked apprentice like me is starting to worship him. It's over, maybe Junior Duque will surpass me soon and become a high-ranked apprentice. No, maybe he will become an official mage soon. Xianxia looked at Duque enviously, who had become the center of attention. In fact, it was not just the commoners and apprentices, even the teachers of the mage academies were excited after receiving the magic message. They all spread the news and vented their excitement. We finally have another genius. The Dalajan has Kel, Thuzad, Ronan and Kale, but we only have Khadgar. Now we finally have a little guy with a bright future. The old mages were all ecstatic. Stormwind City was not a place where magic was popular. The overall standard of mages was far behind the holy land of human mages, the Dalajan. But the two sides never stopped competing. Khadgar was the direct disciple of Stormwind City's court mage, Mediv. In terms of power, he could barely compete with the genius disciples of the Dalajan mage organization, Kiran Tor's leader Antonidas. However, a single Karthika was too weak and he could not compare to the many geniuses of Dalaran. Now, all of them seemed to foresee the rise of a monstrous genius. The others were extremely excited, their blood boiling. Everyone else was extremely excited, their blood boiling. What glorious future! What high position and generous salary! Duke did not feel any of it was real. His mind was in a whirl as Duke overheard someone say, "Praise the great King Ryan Rin." Of course, there was also the term court mage Mediv. At this moment, Duque's face turned green. Lang Rin, the king of Stormwind City. The key was, if Duque remembered correctly in this timeline, a guy named Ghoul Dan unified all the orc tribes, formed the Horde and prepared to cross the large portal, the Dark Portal, to attack planet Azeroth. And Lang would die in the first large-scale orc invasion. Moreover, the Stormwind city that Duque was in would be attacked by the Horde, and the whole city and even the whole kingdom would be destroyed. If Aurelia's appearance before was to let Duque confirm that the timeline was before the Dark Portal incident, then this time, Duque was very sure that this big event was almost right in front of him. Thinking about this, Duque felt terrible. Being able to become a mage was something to be happy about. But regarding the upcoming large-scale war for the first time, Duque felt that time was so tight. There was no use in trying to escape. War would sweep the whole world, from Stormwind City to Iron Furnace Fort, to Rapids Fort to Alterac to Lordaeron. Kibbe said that there was almost no place in the world that was safe. And not only this time, other than the Orc War, there would also be the Lich King's Scourge Army, the Demon King Sargera's Burning Legion, and many other powerful enemies that would visit Azeroth. It was not something that could be avoided even if one wanted to. If one didn't want to die and finally become a ghoul, the only way was to become stronger. Become stronger than anyone else. And even influence the course of the upcoming war. Become the hero of the world and even the leader of the world. Duque didn't know when exactly the first Orc War would come, and whether that damned dark portal had opened. The calendar calculation was completely different from the game, and this made Duque lose the scale of evaluation. And most importantly, the system's evaluation of the world of Azeroth had been fluctuating around 80%. In other words, there were many variables. Duque got rid of all distracting thoughts. He knew that as a transmigrator without any noble status, he could only walk the path of the Pharaoh all the way to the dark. Either he established himself in this world as a hero or he became a ghoul. There was no third option. It was late at night, and Duque could hear many voices mentioning his name near Northshire Abbey. The commoners were excitedly discussing everything about him, Duque, during the day. Phew. It feels good to be a famous person, Duque mumbled to himself as he placed his hands on the windowsill. At this time someone said, "Yes. Too bad it's only half a day." Cough. Before he could react, Duque suddenly felt a sharp pain at the back of his head. Sap. Rogue. Along with the pain came a violent dizziness, and the dizziness made Duque lose his sense of direction. The next moment his neck was attacked. A sharp dagger pierced through the skin at the back of Duque's neck, but Duque did not feel any pain. Instead he felt a tingling numbness in his head. Cerebral paralysis poison? No matter how stupid Duque was, he knew that he had definitely been ambushed by a rogue and a very skilled one at that. Duque did not know if there was such a thing as levels in this world, but through the system, Duque saw a large skull mark above the opponent's head. This was not something he could fight against. The opponent was being very careful, and it was obvious that they were treating him like a professional mage. There was no way for Duque to fight back. The next moment, Duque found himself kicked to the ground. His mouth instinctively opened wide and he wanted to breathe, but at that moment, something was stuffed in his mouth. Woo-woo. It was Duque's indistinct cries of extreme discomfort. Before he fainted, he saw an unfamiliar face with a black cloth covering the area below the nose. Who are you? Duque's mouth moved and he wanted to ask, but he could not spit out a word. The face under the cloth was probably grinning. There was no answer and the guy just lifted Duque up and jumped out of the window like the wind. Chapter 9. Duque woke up because of a sharp pain under his right rib. In his blurry vision, he realized that the scene had changed from the Northshire Abbey to the Elvain forest full of dark branches. "Kid, can you hear me?" "Ugh." Hearing the voice that was deliberately suppressed, Duque knew that he could not possibly know who the person was. Duque swore that he did not know this guy at all. Opening his mouth wide, Duque realized that he could only spit out a blood bubble. He could not speak at all. At this moment, Duque realized that a dagger was stabbed under his right rib. The paralysis poison made his senses less sensitive, but the pain was still beyond the paralysis range of the paralysis poison. It brought waves of heart-wrenching pain to Duque. "Kid, I'll let you die knowing. If you did not embarrass Sir Brando so much during the day, maybe the Brando family would have accepted you into the family because of your talent as a mage. Haha. It's a pity that you have such talent. Ugh." Duque wanted to curse, but the dagger had caused a large amount of blood to flow into his lungs. Half of his lungs were submerged in blood. He was in so much pain that he could not speak. Damn it. Damn it. As expected, there was nothing good about the nobles. An emotion called regret dyed Duque's heart. As a law-abiding university student, Duque's heart had not completely changed, so he fell into the trap. He fell to the other party's revenge so easily. All Brando had to do was send out an unknown thief to take him down. Kid, don't think that anyone will stand up for you. No matter how strong your talent is, if you can't turn it into strength, you are still that weak kid. Don't worry, I'll take good care of you. The other party grabbed Duque's face and twisted Duque's neck forcefully, pointing at a blurry place in the distance. It was the lakeside, and there were many rough triangular houses. Next to the lake, there was a large group of monsters with the upper bodies of fish and strange humanoid limbs. Duque immediately recognized them. Yes, mermen. The man laughed ferociously. A boy who was unfamiliar with the ways of the world. He was too excited to sleep at night, and then he accidentally wandered into the Elvain forest. He ran into the Murlocs who didn't care about meat and was eaten. Wasn't this a perfect script? At least no matter who suspects it, there's no way to prove that Sir Brando did it. Duque's body trembled. Thinking about how his body was about to be torn apart by those sharp and smelly teeth, Duque felt a wave of disgust. His vision darkened. Duque was dead. The other party had overestimated Duque's small physique. Perhaps in the eyes of the other party, even a commoner kid would be able to last for about 20 minutes. What? He died just like that? I want to hear your screams when you're swallowed alive by the Murlocs, and then record it with a magic crystal for Lord Brando. The other party looked annoyed, but in a flash he was relieved. Forget it, I'll bring back the remains of his body after the Murlocs devoured him. Let his lordship know that he suffered enough pain before he died. That should be enough. With that, the bandit assassin stepped forward, trying to drag Duque's leg, lift him up again and throw him to the Murlocs. Just as he picked up Duque, he suddenly found that the weight on his shoulder disappeared. Oh, is that so? Then I'll use the same method to deal with you. You don't have a problem with that, do you? Duque's cold voice sounded behind the bandit like a ghost. The voice of the system elf kept ringing in Duque's ears. The continuous voice should be slow and time-consuming, but Duque suddenly found that the voice was compressed, like a high-level computer that could complete billions of calculations in a second. The voice of the system turned into words, pictures, and even telepathic information that Duque could understand and was directly received by Duque. In the outside world, not even 1,000th of a second had passed. Detected that the host is in a major crisis. Estimated enemy's reaction time is 0. 3 seconds. Casting process ignored. Detected that there are no borrowed elements in the outside world, automatically changing to extracting the host's internal magical energy. Calculating entropy value, spell model reset. Special skill, calm and composed, activated. Calm and composed. Metamagic ability able to automatically ignore the casting time of the next non-instant cast spell, changing it to instant cast. System automatically calibrated. Level 1, Flame Blast, launched. Without any time to react, the bandit was shocked to find that there was a blazing light behind him, and a fiery rock the size of a water basin was smashed towards his head. Bang! Unprepared, this bandit brother took Duque's Flame Blast head-on. His whole body flew out, and his whole body was engulfed in flames, letting out a shrill scream. Is it over? No. Not yet. Duque didn't know how strong this guy was, but he endured the discomfort from the system helping him to launch that flame blast, and almost forcefully swallowed the nausea in his chest and started to cast the second flame blast. Duque didn't know if he could succeed, and he didn't know if he still had enough magical energy, but he instinctively felt that this guy definitely wouldn't die, so he had to finish him off. The system's voice kept ringing, detected that the host's internal magical energy backfire, casting failure rate increased by 78%, automatically starting to equalize the input of fire elements. Casting time extended to 8 seconds, spell power increased, 8 seconds. 8 seconds that decided life and death. If he had a choice, Duque definitely wouldn't foolishly stand still and cast a fireball for 7 seconds. The tragedy was that Duque, this so-called magic apprentice, only had this one spell. He randomly mastered Flame Blast, but he didn't even know the fireball spell that came before Flame Blast. Facing a high agility, high speed, and strength that was who knows how many times stronger than him, Duque knew that his other physical attacks would be ineffective. He could only cast Flame Blast. The bandit was still rolling on the ground, bathed in flames. Although Flame Blast not only dealt instant damage, the flames that wrapped around his body could also cause continuous damage, but Duque could clearly see that the fire was weakening. When the bandit regained his mobility, it would be Duque's time to die again. 8 seconds. 8 seconds that felt like 800 years had finally passed, and with Duque's hope of killing his opponent, a fireball as big as a brazier was once again pushed out from Duque's palm. One detail destroyed all of Duque's hopes, because Duque was horrified to find that the bandit who was rolling on the ground suddenly stopped rolling and raised his head. His eyes opened, and it was a pair of fierce and lifelike eyes filled with killing intent. "Kid, I'm going to tear you into pieces." That's what those eyes said. Chapter 10. In the next instant the rogue raised his left hand, and a shadow cloak suddenly spread out. Even if Duque hadn't seen it with his own eyes, he knew that this was the rogue's godly skill, Shadow Cloak. In the game, this skill had a 90% chance of blocking magic damage once. Damn. How high is this rogue's level? This guy's screams and rolling around were all acting. Other people said that life was like a play, but now Duque said that the play was like life. Duque could almost foresee that he was going to die again. At this moment, Duque even made up his mind that even if his corpse was ruined and his corpse was camped, he wouldn't revive first. At this moment, Duque was shocked to find that there was still 98% soul power in the system notification, but only 88% of humanity was left. What's going on? Duque shouted in his heart. The system elf came out. Because you were killed in a state of extreme pain and resentment, your death in this situation will cause additional loss of your humanity. Then what should I do? Fortunately, the system elf wasn't that cruel and replied to Duque with a cold dish, or something like that. It replied seriously, if you can kill your target of hatred, you should be able to get back half of the lost humanity. Fasterthy, who said that after taking revenge there would be emptiness. Not taking revenge was 10% and taking revenge was 5%. There was no need to ask how to choose. But the premise was that he could take revenge. Duque almost burst into tears. Time seemed to freeze, but at this critical moment, Duque suddenly stretched out his left hand and clenched. The flames that should have wrapped around the rogue's body jumped to the tip of the rogue's nose and suddenly burst into a dazzling light. This was almost like a flash bomb hitting his face. The intense light was not something that could be blocked by thin eyelets at all. I don't care if it's a corium or dog eye or a rogue's eye, I'll blind them all. The rogue instinctively stopped his shadow cloak, because of the strange flash. As if a blazing hurricane had swept past, the thief and his clothes exploded with a loud bang. Even the trees around him were affected. Countless wood shavings, stones, and pieces of human flesh and bones expanded and exploded backwards in an instant. Then a few seconds later they scattered again like countless fireflies dancing in the sky and then withered. At the moment of the explosion, an almost imperceptible speck of light flew out from the thief's body and shot into Duque's chest like a bolt of lightning. Of course, Duque did not notice this abnormality at all, because his eyes were also affected. Ooh. Everything happened too fast. It was as fast as lightning. Duque had blinded the dog's eyes, and tears had come out of his own eyes because of the strong light. The only thing he could be sure of was the system elf's notification. Congratulations, you've killed an unknown level rogue. You've received 8,800 soul experience points. Despite the pain, Duque knew that the rogue must have received the entire flame blast. Here, this is a handkerchief that has been soaked in water. You should feel better after applying it to your eyes. A pleasant female voice that sounded a little strange yet familiar came over. Duque subconsciously took the handkerchief and raised his head to apply it to his eyes. The dizziness caused by his eyes subsided slightly. Duque suddenly came back to his senses. Wait. Something seems wrong? Duque removed the handkerchief with one hand and forced himself to open his eyes. After the strong light, his eyeballs felt very uncomfortable. Duque struggled to see a pair of Hygel's peaks wrapped in green inner armor. Damn it, it's Aurelia. What's going on? How did Aurelia come here? But if it was her, she wouldn't just kill people, right? According to the original development of history, Aurelia would have become the recognized hero of the Alliance in the world of Azeroth, the embodiment of courage and justice. She first became famous in the war between the High Elves and the Trolls, and then became active in the front line of the Alliance against the Orcs. Although he didn't know why Aurelia was here, Duque was obviously relieved and sat on the ground. Duque felt good, but Aurelia was not. Hey, you're so weird. What do you mean by looking at me? You just looked at me and then sat down? How did you know that I'm Aurelia Windrunner? Hey. Aurelia had her hands on her waist, like a female T-Rex that was about to go berserk. The mana in my body is chaotic. Let me take a break. He didn't know if what happened just now counted as killing an enemy above his level, but Duque didn't feel good. Humph. Aurelia was so angry that her teeth itched. Seeing that the human youth was in such a bad state, she chose to remain silent. In this world, the High Elves were the ancestors of magic. Aurelia was born into the Windrunner family. Even though she inherited the skills of rangers and hunters, Aurelia, who spent her days with a group of mages, could see that Duque was on the verge of being devoured by magic. There were a few minutes when Aurelia thought that Duque would be killed by the backlash. Miraculously, she saw that Duque could actually do something that many official mages couldn't. He was orderly guiding the elements in his body back to their place and calming their flow. This was not something that a mage's apprentice could do. Moreover, Duque was only a mage's apprentice in name. He hadn't even received half a day's worth of formal education. With great difficulty, Duque finally opened his eyes. Looking at the beautiful yet dangerous high elf hero, he sighed. Alright, I thought you'd leave after watching the show. You've been following me? When did it start? Illyria broke into a smile. Even though the night couldn't be seen clearly, her beauty was still breathtaking against the backdrop of her golden hair, which seemed to glow on its own. Since you escaped from the wild boar. Aurelia wasn't embarrassed to admit it. At the riverbank for a while. When you walked to Northshire Abbey, I followed you again. That meant she saw everything. Duque suddenly wanted to die. Suddenly, Duque had a question. You exposed Brando's act of stealing credit and caused me so much trouble and then watched as that guy attacked me? Do you still have a conscience? Yo, it seems that you know a lot of things. Aurelia smirked. Yo, in front of me there's a super mage's apprentice who tricked the king of the forest, the famous Aurelia Windrunner. His mirror image is more powerful than many high-level mages. I think you can deal with that little noble. Besides, if things really go wrong, I'll take you to Lordaeron or somewhere else. Aurelia was really casual. Duque was a bit dizzy. Alright, I'm dead. I've been mistaken for the mirror image technique. That was a high-level spell that only level 80 mages could learn in the game. The only good thing was that because Aurelia thought it was mirror image, Duque didn't have to bother lying about why he died and resurrected. Duque really didn't know how to tell Aurelia about such a high-class resurrection method. Chapter 11. Duque rolled his eyes at Aurelia. He did not know why, but he felt that the eldest sister of the Windrunner family was quite different from what he had imagined. Not only was she curious, but she also knew how to get to the bottom of things. Was she really the eldest sister of the 3 Windrunner sisters? Or was it that Aurelia was 20% of the world's 80%? Faced with Duque's silence, Aurelia was very understanding. Don't worry. I'm just a high elf passing by on vacation. I'm simply curious about the unknown. If this is a violation of your privacy, I apologize. Yes, I've already heard your name, Mr. Duke Marcus. Duque was a little embarrassed. He touched his nose and reached out his hand to shake. At the same time, he replied naturally, All right, I accept your apology, Aurelia. Aurelia was stunned. She immediately understood that this was human etiquette. She also reached out and shook Duque's hand. As soon as they shook hands, Duque cursed in his heart. As a ranger, drawing a bow and knocking an arrow was a compulsory course. In Duque's imagination, as a famous ranger general in the world of Azeroth, Aurelia's hands should be very rough and even have a lot of calluses. Unexpectedly, what he grasped was a soft, nimble and fair palm. It felt like it was boneless and it felt like it was nimble. Indeed. Are all high elves monsters? How can their fingers not get thicker no matter how much they practice? While Duque was still in shock, Aurelia showed a slightly sly smile. Hey Duque, you really do know who I am. I don't think I've introduced myself to you. In my impression, high elves are all the same to you humans. What's that adjective? Well, face blindness. Duque suddenly realized that Aurelia had dug a big hole for him. He had foolishly jumped in and buried himself. The 3 Windrunner sisters are also very famous in our world. Pfft. Aurelia burst out laughing. Ha. Ha. You are such an interesting person. How interesting. Even the wisest mages in Stormwind, at least 80% of them did not know the name of King Kuel Salas. A little commoner like you actually knows the name of a Kuel Salas Ranger General thousands of miles away. There was no derogatory or accusatory tone. Aurelia was simply bursting with curiosity. A human with only the potential of an apprentice could fake his death using the mirror image spell. He could also cast a difficult fire elemental spell without a teacher. He could even know the name of an unknown ranger general in the northern part of the Eastern Kingdom. Aurelia had gone from being curious to paying close attention. After holding her stomach and laughing for a long time, Aurelia finally straightened her back and wiped the tears from the corner of her eyes. Fortunately, you were wrong once. Otherwise, I would have thought that you were the reincarnation of a sage or an omniscient being. Ugh, I was wrong? Duque was a little confused. I really don't know where you heard of the 3 Windrunner sisters. However, in this generation of Windrunner, there are 4 sisters. In terms of fame, my third sister Lilith is the most famous. 2 years ago, she single-handedly killed 128 trolls in the battle against the trolls. After listening, Duque said 3 things in one breath in his heart. What the hell? What the hell? Divine Beast Motherf ****. Important things must be repeated 3 times. Otherwise, he would not know that this was a big deal. First, the trolls were not some amusing monsters. These trolls with moss skin could regrow lost arms and heal serious physical wounds. They were a humanoid race with super strong regenerative abilities. As long as they did not get shot in the head or skewered in the heart, any broken limbs could be recovered by eating a piece of meat. Yes. Meat, whether it was the enemy's or their own. Meat of all kinds. Not only were they barbaric and evil, but they also believed in all kinds of cruel blood sacrifices. They were also very powerful warriors. It was not easy to kill these guys. Even the professionally trained soldiers of Stormwind City needed at least 3 to 4 people to kill a troll. But Aurelia said that Lilith killed more than 100 of them by herself? It sounded like Lilith had already entered the realm of heroes. Actually, the important thing was the second thing. It was Lilith's, not Rira's. In the original game that Duque played before he transmigrated in this generation of the Windrunner family, other than the 3 famous Windrunner sisters, there was actually a little burden. The 4th child who was also the only male, Rira's. And in this timeline, Rira should have died in the invasion of the trolls. This was also one of Aurelia's biggest worries in the future. But now the 3 Windrunner sisters had become 4 sisters. Not only did Rira's become a sissy, but he also sounded very arrogant. This was the system's judgment of 20% discrepancy? Duque's heart was in a mess in the night wind. Damn it. He always felt that if he completely believed in the events of the game before he transmigrated, he would die a terrible death. Duque could almost see the ghoul Duque in the mirror of fate waving at him. Seeing Duque's mouth open in surprise, which was big enough to fit an egg, Aurelia laughed heartily. Looks like you know what a troll is, right? Isn't Lilith powerful? She's the sister I'm most proud of. But having a sister who is too outstanding is also troublesome. Those bastard counselors Kuel Salas find trouble with me and my second sister every day, saying that the Windrunner family is dominating the entire ranger team. So in a fit of anger I took a year's leave and ran out to relax. Duque was speechless. How could this work? However, he at least understood the meaning behind Aurelia's words. She, as a ranger general, did not mind exposing the dirty secrets in Kuel Salas's country. She would also not say that he killed this thief. After all, Illyria felt that there shouldn't be any conflict of interest between a high elven ranger general and an insignificant mage apprentice from a human kingdom. Duque sighed. All right, you don't care about my conflict with the nobles, and I don't care about your observation of me. Is that what you mean? Don't make me sound like a peeping Tom. I just want to say that if you have any interesting activities that can relieve your boredom, please call me. All right, as a reward for your courage to go against the stupid nobles, and as a thank you gift, this is for you. Aurelia handed over a booklet. This is Chapter 12. A Beginner's Handbook for a High Elf Wizard Apprentice. It's even better than the Dalajan, the Holy Land of Human Magic. The only problem is that it's written in the High Elf language. You'll need to find someone or learn the language yourself to translate it. Even if he said it was a beginner's handbook for apprentices, It wasn't considered a leak. After all, the spells of humans in the world of Azeroth were all taught by the High Elves. However, even if it was like a weed on the side of the road, it was still a treasure in the human kingdom. Looking at the system notification, you've received a beginner's handbook for a High Elf Wizard Apprentice. It's expected to greatly improve your magic skills. Duque was so happy that he almost cried. Fine, I'm a newbie now. Aurelia, I'll save myself the trouble of being bought over by you. Duque suddenly remembered something. Wait. Haven't you Windwalkers always been rangers for generations? Why do you have this? Aurelia blushed. Damn brat, do I have to say it out loud? Back then, third sister Sasha was bored and wanted to try out magic. The elders of the mainstream magic faction in Kuel Salis were very excited. They thought that the Windrunner family had finally produced a weirdo who was close to the mainstream magic faction. They spent a lot of effort to get this to lure Sasha into the world of magic, but Sasha threw it away after looking at it for 3 minutes. Do you want me to return it when I'm passing by the Dalajan? Aurelia would never say such an embarrassing thing, so she argued, I didn't steal it anyway. If you don't want it, give it back to me. I want it. Of course I want it. Duque didn't let go of the handbook as if he was afraid that Aurelia would snatch it back. Seeing how nervous Duque was about her gift, Aurelia smiled. This is for you. Aurelia handed him a green leaf that contained a strange energy. You know how to blow a leaf, right? Once you blow this, I'll rush over. Remember, it has to be something interesting to summon me. Also, if you don't look for me for too long, I'll come looking for you. Pfft. Duque choked. As it turns out, this guy is relying on me. He really didn't know if this was a blessing or a curse. With that, Aurelia disappeared. He came and went like the wind. Duque didn't even see how she left. In a flash, he disappeared. Duque rubbed his eyebrows. Damn it. It seems like the women of the Windrunner family are quite capricious except when they're on duty. He was obviously talking to himself, but Aurelia suddenly said from the depths of the forest, I heard it. Cough. Duque almost choked on his own saliva. Cough, cough, cough. I can't beat him, I can't chase him away, and I'm even used as a lab rat to observe him. This should be an ill-fated relationship, right? Alright, Aurelia is gone for now. Then things are back on track. Looking at the blackened body of the thief, Duque felt like vomiting. He didn't feel it before, but when everything calmed down, he suddenly felt a nausea that he couldn't suppress. If he wanted to vomit, he vomited. Duque really vomited. Wah, Duke vomited all over the place. University animals were just animals with a bit of culture. 9 out of 10 university animals had never even slaughtered a chicken before, let alone seen a scene of flesh and blood splattering everywhere. Fortunately, it was night. His vision was blurry and the body was blackened. Otherwise, Duque might have nightmares for a long time in the future. The body had to be dealt with. Otherwise, when the forest rangers, woodsmen, and hunters saw a burnt body, they would easily associate it with Duque. After all, in the human world, Pharaoh was still a rare commodity. At this moment, the murlocs in the distance seemed to have been alerted. Rustling footsteps came from afar. Even though the body might be eaten by the murlocs, Duque didn't dare to take the risk. Before the murlocs arrived, Duque quickly looted the disgusting smell of roasted meat. He found a few dozen silver coins and threw the body into the river. Duque immediately turned around and left. If he didn't make a mistake, the thief's body would flow down the river to the murlocs' territory. Even if it couldn't reach it, the murlocs would smell it in the water and look for it. The murlocs in the world of Azeroth weren't good people. It was a big mistake to think of murlocs as mermaids. Murlocs were monsters with a swollen upper body, a fish-shaped body as big as a water tank, and 4 human-like limbs. These savage creatures with low intelligence were a classic example of how they couldn't be killed no matter how hard they tried. Following the lights of the Northshire Abbey on the hill in the distance, Duque groped his way forward in the dark. The sound of a human body being chewed by a carnivorous animal could be heard in the wind. The sound sent chills down Duque's spine, and he couldn't help but quicken his steps. About 40 minutes later, Duque finally escaped from the forest. The Northshire Abbey was just a human settlement. It wasn't a big town, so in terms of defense, it only had ordinary wooden fences that were 2 meters tall. There weren't even sharp objects on the fences. For a university student who often climbed over the walls to avoid the dormitory's security, this was definitely a piece of cake. Seeing that there was no one around, Duque simply used his hands to climb up. After climbing over the fence, Duque fumbled his way back to the inn he was staying at. What Duque didn't know was that after Duque climbed over the wall, a figure in full armor appeared in a dark corner near the fence. It was Vice Captain Viry. God bless Stormwind. At least Duque wasn't killed. When Duque was taken away by the thief and jumped over the fence, Duque saw it from afar, but he wasn't sure. He couldn't just rely on a figure that flashed by and recklessly mobilized the guards to enter the forest to search for Duque. He also couldn't leave his post and go to the inn to check if Duque was still there. Because he knew that if it was Brando's men who wanted to kill him, it would be too late. Uneasy and unable to forgive himself, Vice Captain Viry spent more than an hour with his conscience blaming him. Now that he saw Duque, who was supposed to be killed, sneakily climb over the fence as if nothing had happened, Viry didn't know why, but he was relieved. After confirming that Duque's figure was far away, Viry walked out quietly and gently wiped away all traces of Duque climbing over the fence, such as footprints. When he returned to the inn and saw that nothing had changed in the room, Duque was too tired. It was a triple tiredness that affected his body, mind, and soul. Duque fell into a deep sleep. The next morning, when he was eating breakfast on the first floor of the inn, Duque saw two young magician apprentices beside the old magician Norton. When the old man saw the energetic Duque, the wrinkles on his wrinkled face smoothed out. He pointed at a burly male apprentice who was at least 1.9 meters tall. His name is Darnielle. He's a qualified apprentice from the East Cove Lumberyard, 3rd grade aptitude. This was a big boy who looked at most 14 or 15 years old, definitely not even 16. His face was clearly immature and simple, and he was wearing a very unsuitable short shirt. Hello, Mr. Marcus. I'm Darnielle, the son of the lumberyard's owner. I'm very happy to be in the same class as you. Duque smiled indifferently and shook hands with him. Hello, Darnielle. Without waiting for old magician Norton's introduction, the other girl had already stood up and shook hands with Duque. I'm Itana, the daughter of the clerk of the Elven Forest's West Spring Stronghold, 4th grade aptitude. Duke Marcus, nice to meet you. Me too, Itana. Just as Duque was about to talk further with the two apprentices, he suddenly heard a scream behind him. It was Sir Brando's scream. How are you still alive? Chapter 13. When a person was bitten by a mosquito, most people would want to kill it. Was killing a mosquito a big deal? No. But in the eyes of a noble like Brando, killing a commoner named Duque was not a big deal at all. When faced with Brando's blatant questioning of why he was not dead yet. At this moment, Duque once again truly felt that he had transmigrated. The world before he transmigrated was a world governed by law. If there was a son of an official who acted so recklessly, once he was exposed, even God would not be able to save him. But the human kingdom of Azeroth was obviously a world ruled by men. The king and the nobles were at the top of the social hierarchy. Their orders and wills were absolute, and absolute power led to absolute corruption. Northshire Abbey was already a territory relatively close to the capital, Stormwind City. Thinking about how a trash knight at the bottom of the aristocratic hierarchy could do whatever he wanted, Duque began to understand why the humans of Stormwind were defeated by the orcs in the First Orc War, and even the capital was flattened. Back then, Thoradin the Great of the Arathar Empire was determined to forge ahead and open up new territories for the humans. After 1,000 years of metamorphosis, corruption and degeneration had long disappeared among the ordinary nobles. If it wasn't for Anduin Lothar, who had extraordinary military abilities, if it wasn't for the current Guardian Medivh, who had not fallen, if it wasn't for King Lang, who was a wise king, then Stormwind at this moment would be a pile of stinky shit. Duque was not familiar with the plot of this timeline. Because this timeline was too early, Duque had almost no impression of it. The only thing he remembered was that when the dark portal opened, Anduin Lothar fell into endless wrangling with the nobles. Even the great hero of the human alliance, Lothar, could not deal with the nobles. What could a mere mage apprentice like Duque do? From this point of view, Duque could swallow his anger. But don't forget that Duque was a transmigrator. He came from a modern society without nobles or absolute power. Nobles above everything? Bullsh**. Duque wouldn't fall for it. Just like how the commoners here would tremble at the sight of nobles, it was impossible for this to happen to Duque. Duque suddenly sneered. Huh? Looks like Sir Brando really wants me dead. He actually asked me, why am I still alive, so early in the morning? Where's Gasco? What did you do to Gasco? It was only then that Brando realized why his confidant didn't report to him after he woke up. Gasco would never dare to disturb his sleep, but after he washed up he would probably roll over to report. Duque shrugged. Sorry, I don't know who this Gasco is. Brando was infuriated. He waved his fists as he approached Duque. Impossible, he should have. Damn it. You must have killed him. How dare you kill him? Don't you know he's my servant? Killing him is a provocation to the Brando family and the whole of Stormwind. Slap. A slap landed on the left side of Brando's face. When the slap landed on the face that was covered in white powder, the bystanders could clearly see that the slap had stirred up a huge cloud of dust. The huge impact caused Brando's entire face to contort. For a moment, Brando thought his left eye had been smashed. The world spun around him and Brando was slapped to the wooden floor. When he finally came back to his senses, the burning pain on his face and the humiliation that kept surging up from his chest told him that he had been hit by Duke. Moreover, he was beaten up in front of more than 10 people. Duke didn't even lift his eyelids as he casually pointed at a dead fly on the table next to him and said, "By the way, are you a scumbag? When I was swatting a fly, why did you have to stick your face in my palm?" If it was the Duque from yesterday, he would never have done it. As a modern man, obeying the law was something that was engraved in his bones. But now that he had met his enemy, Duque's moral integrity, oh no, his humanity had automatically dropped by 30 points. Well, there was basically nothing that Duque couldn't do. Alright, it was Duque who had slapped someone, but he turned black into white. He insisted that slapping someone's face was like slapping a fly. He was a weirdo. Protect the young master. At this moment, Brando's servants rushed forward, ready to deal with Duque at all costs. Calm and composed, activated. Just as Duque was about to give them a flame blast, to teach them a lesson. He was shocked to find that Darnielle and Itana, who he had just met, stood in front of him, one on the left and one on the right. What are you doing? How dare you attack an apprentice from the Stormwind Arcane Academy in front of Sir Norton? The servants were stunned. They all froze as if they had been hit by petrify. If it was an ordinary kid, it was a slap. But Pharaoh of the Stormwind Arcane Academy was not to be trifled with. After all, Pharaoh's status in Stormwind and even in the entire human world was transcendent. Not to mention there was also a high-ranking court mage here. Did they have a death wish? But what surprised Duque the most was that Darnielle and Itana, who he had just met, were actually on his side. What he didn't know was that his slap had changed his stance. Before he came, there were countless commoners who had been bullied by nobles like Brando. Be it men or women, young or old, commoners, guards, or even knights, they had long disliked the actions of these lower nobles. But they didn't have the guts to resist, and they and the families behind them couldn't bear the consequences of the nobles' retaliation. Now that the rising star of Stormwind City Royal Magic Academy had publicly stood out as commoners, they subconsciously chose to stand on Duque's side. The three apprentices who might have a high status in the future stood together against Brando, and the atmosphere immediately became subtle. At this time Brando's voice sounded, "Kill him. Kill Duke Marcus. He insulted the Brando family. He insulted Stormwind. He insulted Thoradin the Great's bloodline. He should go to hell and be burned for 10,000 years. Kill him, and the Brando family will bear the consequences." Brando's embarrassment turned into anger, and he didn't even want to hide his shame. "Kill me? Then I'll kill you first." Duke made his move. He made his move without any hesitation. He directly used a flame burst without any hesitation. Even Darnielle and Itana, who were in front, were almost affected, and they almost subconsciously dodged. Seeing the huge fireball the size of a water tank, Brando was so scared that he peed his pants, and the stinky liquid quickly dyed his white pants dark. No. Chapter 14. At this moment, an ice wall suddenly appeared out of thin air in the trajectory of the flame blast. The gigantic fireball blasted onto the ice wall that was chilling to the bone. Sparks flew in all directions, and the sparks that flew out burned Brando's servants, causing them to wail like ghosts and howl like wolves as they burned from the heat. For a moment the entire lobby of the inn was in chaos. Actually, when both sides started arguing, some of the cowardly fellows had already left, but there were still many who wanted to see Brando suffer. In the end they were almost caught in the crossfire. Some crashed into the door and some jumped through the window. After a few seconds, other than the bitter innkeeper and the person in question, everyone left in a hubbub. Old Man Norton had his reasons for taking action at this time. At first the old man wanted to smooth things over. After all, the mages of Stormwind City were inextricably linked to the nobles, and it would not be good to make things too awkward. Unlike the holy land of human mages in the Dalajan, which purely studied magic, the mages of Stormwind City usually worked in Stormwind City. Old Man Norton was a member of the royal family's mage team, but seeing that Brando had already surpassed Zosazo to the point of threatening death, Old Man Norton had already made up his mind. Even if Duque did not take action, he would take care of Fame Brando. He didn't expect Brando to say that he wanted to kill his apprentice right in front of him. This was like a slap to his face. He was going to make a move, but he didn't expect Duke, this so-called apprentice, to know a godly skill like calm and composed, that could be called a bug. While he was stunned, he almost got into trouble. If he, Norton, and Duque really killed Brando, it would be a huge incident that would shock the entire kingdom. He had no choice but to help Brando block the fireball. Seeing Duque suddenly turn his head and shoot a murderous glare at him, Old Man Norton could not help but smile bitterly. This kid actually hates me. Just as Norton was about to say something, the guards of the Northshire Abbey arrived. The one leading them was Vice Captain Viry. What was surprising was that there were 4 guards behind him carrying a simple stretcher. Without a word, Viry lifted the cloth covering the stretcher. Brando, the useless noble, had never seen such a bloody and horrifying corpse before. Looking at the blood-red leg bones that had been gnawed to the bone, Brando vomited on the spot. Viry said, "I recognize this pair of expensive boots. He should be Sir Brando's man, right?" Faced with Viry's interrogation, Brando finally finished vomiting and nodded. Yes. He was Gasco. My servant, a thief. Brando pointed at Duque. He killed my servant. Duque sneered. Just as he was about to say something, he was interrupted by Viry. That's impossible. Last night when he left the Northshire Abbey I met him. I advised him not to enter the Elven Forest at night, but he refused to listen. In the end, he was unlucky and was attacked by the Murlocs. Viry's vivid explanation surprised Duque. At this time he saw Viry turn his head and wink at him. Duque was instantly amused. He immediately replied, "Yes. This Mr. Gasco should have just arrived at the Northshire Abbey. Alone, unfamiliar with the world, so excited that he couldn't sleep at night. Then he accidentally wandered into the Elven Forest and met the Murlocs. In the end he was eaten by them." When Fame Brando heard this, his lungs almost exploded in anger. Wasn't this the script he made up for Gasco to execute? Just like how no one could produce evidence to prove that he did it with the patrol leader as a witness, he also could not prove that Duque did it. Covering his face with one hand, Brando pointed at Duque with a trembling finger. You. He said the word "you" 3 times in a row but could not continue. A thought flashed through his mind and he immediately said, "Then what about the matter of him beating me up? The grave sin of insulting Saladin's bloodline." Enough. Old Man Norton, who looked the most mature, suddenly let out an angry roar. The roar was filled with magic and it almost shattered all the glass in the hotel lobby. He picked up the dagger that was placed beside the corpse, his wrinkled hands trembling. As an experienced old mage, how could he not recognize the cerebral paralysis poison on it? This thing was specially used by thieves to attack mages. Mages who were stabbed by this thing would have a high chance of increasing the casting time required for a short period of time. This thing was not easy to get. Not only was it expensive, it was also extremely rare. Other than those very rich nobles who were very afraid of mages, normal thieves would not be able to get their hands on this thing. Even if Norton was an idiot, he knew how vicious and sinister Brando was this time. He was too careless, thinking that Brando would not dare to make a move on Duque because he was an apprentice of the Royal Magic Academy. Now it seemed that he had underestimated Brando's insanity. What happened last night was very clear. Brando sent this thief named Gasco to assassinate Duque. For some reason, Duque escaped and killed Gasco instead. No wonder Duque was so angry. Anyone who was almost killed would be so angry. Old Man Norton's prediction was basically correct. The only mistake he made was that he wasn't almost killed, but really killed. Old Man Norton was also angry. He pointed at Brando's still intact face and said, "There's a mosquito." How could Duque not know? He took a big stride forward, his left hand like a whirlwind. Slap. In front of Brando's servant, in front of the guards, in front of almost 100 spectators who had been bullied by Brando, Duque slapped him again. It could be clearly seen that a tooth near the right side of Brando's face had been slapped away. The bloodied tooth spun in the air for many, many times before it landed on the table with a clatter. After it landed on the table, it continued to spin around. Looking at Norton, who was standing before him with a head full of white hair and beard that puffed up along with the strong waves of transcendence energy, Brando was completely dumbfounded. His once arrogant eyes were now filled with confusion and fear. "Tell your elders, if I find out that you dare to make a move on Duque again, then wait for your castle to be burned down by me." After saying that, Norton left without looking back. When he left, he even put his hand on Duque's shoulder and dragged Duque away. Almost as soon as he was out of the door, he said from afar, "By the way, your qualification as a mage apprentice this year has been cancelled. I am the chief examiner, I have the final say. Even if the Mediv came, he would not be able to change my mind." Chapter 15. Brando could not believe his ears. "I'm fired? I'm actually fired?" Brando, who was sitting on the floor, had no more strength left. He laid on the floor of the hotel lobby, his unfocused eyes staring blankly at the ceiling. After being disqualified from the Stormwind City Royal Magic Academy, he was still a noble, but he had become a laughing stock among the nobles. He was not the eldest son of the family, and according to the inheritance laws of Stormwind City and the Arajuo Empire, he could not inherit his father's title. There were only two ways for the nobles to climb up the ranks. They could either be conferred with military merits or climb up the ranks in other ways. Stormwind City was located in the south of the eastern continent of Azeroth, close to the west coast, and to the north was a mountain that could not be developed. Only the elven forest, which surrounded Stormwind City in a half-moon shape in the south and east, was the most ideal fiefdom. Unfortunately, after thousands of years, the elven forest, which was the heart of Stormwind City, no longer had any spare land to accommodate more nobles. To the southwest of Stormwind City was the barren western wilderness. Further south was the dark and gloomy Twilight Forest, and further east was the barren Reedridge Mountains. For the nobles who were greedy for pleasure, no matter which direction they went, it was a godforsaken place. Once they obtained military merits, if they wanted to become a real noble with a fiefdom, then they would have to go in these three directions and suffer in those bitter cold places. So conferring a noble title was not a good idea. It was not easy to climb up the ranks either. The military was firmly controlled by Anduin Lothar. As the last descendant of Thoradin the Great, and one of King Lang's childhood playmates, Lothar's position in the military was not something any noble could shake. It could be said that the nobles could not even insert a needle into the military. As for the position of internal affairs, even if the Brando family wanted to promote him, they would only promote his brother, not Fame Brando. It was not an exaggeration to say that Brando's current position was purely because of his talent as a wizard. Now he was sentenced to death by a single sentence from Old Man Norton. Do you think Brando will go crazy? After a short moment of confusion, his gaze that seemed to have materialized and was filled with killing intent and endless resentment first landed on Old Norton. In the next second, Fame Brando shifted his target in fear and looked at Duque's back. Beep. You've sensed the hostility of your nemesis, Fame Brando. Your reputation in the Brando family will forever be deadly enemy. Duque snorted coldly at the system elf's prompt. He thought to himself, don't think that killing me will be so easy to forget. You want to kill me, I want to kill you too. I don't believe that I, who can be resurrected, can't win against a small Brando family. Let's see who has the last laugh. Thinking about it was just thinking. Without knowing how to replenish his moral integrity, human nature, Duque would not waste his precious moral integrity to fight a small Brando family. Duque would not do such a stupid thing. Since he had offended Fame Brando so much that even his hatred had solidified, there was no point in trying to reconcile. Even when he walked out of the hotel, Duque still held his head high. The crowd around him was whispering. Duque could not hear it clearly, but he did not care. It was not until he sat in the carriage that Old Man Norton had prepared that he realized that things had changed greatly. He slapped Brando twice, but he did not hear any applause or cheers. As the precious son of the local lord, no one dared to openly cheer for him. However, when the carriage passed by, Duque was shocked to find that many people quietly approached him, gave him a smile, and then handed him a variety of local specialties. A few eggs, a basket of potatoes, or a box of bacon. The villagers' thoughts were so simple and honest that it made Duque's throat choke. Ever since he was born, he had lived for 18 years. He had not done anything bad, but he had not done anything good either. Suddenly being worshipped as a little hero, Duque felt strange. Just as Duque was about to say something, he suddenly remembered the system notification. Congratulations, you have received the gratitude of the people of Northshire Abbey. Your reputation in Northshire Abbey is respect. Due to unknown reasons, your humanity has been slightly restored, and your humanity has increased by 1%. Your current soul energy is 98%, and your humanity is 94%. This. Could it be that doing good deeds and gaining the recognition of the people could restore my moral integrity? For a moment, Duque was a little dazed. He suddenly thought of many things. Just like in the game, reputation was a very important thing. He did not expect that after transmigrating, reputation was just as important. It was only when he boarded the carriage that Old Man Norton prepared, and was in a daze, that Duque came back to his senses. Hell, the carriage in this era was definitely a luxury for ordinary people, but for a transmigrator like Duque, who was used to smooth asphalt roads and comfortable cars with springs, it was a torture. After boarding the carriage, the atmosphere changed again. The three apprentices obediently sat in a row opposite Old Man Norton. The damned old man took out a pipe from nowhere, and blew smoke rings out of the window in front of the three little ones. Little fellows, this old man was once as young and vigorous as you all. Although I agree with your actions from the bottom of my heart, unfortunately, there is a piece of news that I have to tell you. You're in big trouble. Darnielle and Itana's expressions changed instantly. At first, they almost subconsciously stood beside Duque, but after the excitement passed, fear rose from the bottom of their hearts. They had offended the nobles. Although their status as apprentices could temporarily make them forget about this matter, as long as they did not become official mages, they and their families would be at risk of being threatened by the nobles. Old Man Norton continued, Duque, these two are not you. In the world of mages, we pay attention to equivalent exchange. Our Stormwind City Royal Magic Academy is not just a daligen that explores the truth of magic. Here every lesson has to be paid. And every necessities of learning magic, every spell that you want to learn, you have to pay for it with your own money. At this point, Darnielle and Itana's faces were already showing signs of distress. Duque spoke. May I ask, how did the previous apprentices of the Magic Academy be dealt with? Chapter 16. Old Man Norton sighed and blew out a ring of smoke. After you've officially learned magic, you may be able to collect money by exploring ruins and joining mercenary groups to do missions. But before that, you can either learn from you and get no more than 3 scholarships per year, personally sponsored by Court Archmage Mediv. Or you can show your talent at the exchange before school starts and join a noble family. After graduation, you can become a noble mage of that family and receive full financial support from that family during the semester. After a pause, the old man gave an example. First of all, a copy of the Magic Academy's teaching materials for apprentices costs a gold coin. Of course, this is based on the premise that you're completely literate. Without teaching materials, you can't learn anything. In addition, you have to get spellcasting materials for practice. After the old man finished speaking, Darnielle and Itana's faces were completely pale. Both of them were from commoner families, and before the exam, they had never thought that there would be so much trouble. What was the concept of a gold coin? Who knew how many years it would take for their family to gather this amount of money even if they didn't eat or drink? Now, for a moment of anger, they had accidentally forced themselves into a dead end. Even if they thought with their toes, they would know that before the situation became clear, no noble family would dare to invest in them. The tall Darnielle was slightly stubborn. In the face of trouble, he still pursed his lips and his waist was still straight. But the slightly weak Aitana was different. Her body unknowingly began to curl up a little, her hands tightly gripping the hem of her skirt above her knees. Her face was so sad that she looked like she was about to cry, and her eyes were red. Seeing their reaction, Old Man Norton also sighed deeply. Perhaps this was the situation where a copper coin stumped a hero. At this time, Duque took out a booklet from his pocket. "Excuse me, can I lend this to Darnielle and Aitana?" "This is." Old Man Norton's eyes, which were a little cloudy just now, suddenly became clear. No, his eyes were even as bright as light bulbs. "Damn it. Where did you get that High Elf Mage Apprentice Handbook?" Is it very noble?" Seeing the old man's reaction, Duque was a little dumbfounded. Nonsense. Human magic was taught by the High Elves. When it came to magic, the High Elves were the ancestors of humans. Don't underestimate this manual for beginners. There are so many old men in Dalajan who want to get their hands on an original copy, but they can't. As he stared, Old Norton gasped. "Oh God of magic, you're actually not a human, but a descendant of the High Elves, aren't you? No, you're the illegitimate son of the Sun King, right?" As soon as the old man said this, Duque immediately felt 4 pairs of eyes staring at his face, making his face feel like it was on fire. Duque's face was also filled with confusion. "How so?" The old man flipped over the cover of the letter and pointed at a signature that looked like a scribble to Duque and the other 2. "Do you know what's written here?" The 3 little ones shook their heads in unison. The old man waved his hands excitedly and roared in a tone that was close to a roar. "That's Sunstrider. This is the apprentice handbook used by the current High Elf Prince, Kale. That's... Damn it, anything from the Sunstrider royal family, even if it's an introductory handbook for a mage apprentice, is a high-grade item in the eyes of human official mages. Tell me, Duque, where did you get this thing? If you don't handle it well, this thing will bring you great trouble." After the old man finished speaking, Duque was no longer afraid. This thing, there shouldn't be a problem with its origins. It was given to me by a passing bored High Elf Ranger General of Kuel Salis." "I see." Old Norton and Darnielle were immediately relieved. But at this moment, Duque suddenly heard a voice floating in the wind outside the window. "Damn it. Aurelia, how bored are you? You're actually following me." There was a dense forest on both sides of the road. To be honest, the speed of the carriage was not slow. Could be imagined that Aurelia could run faster than a carriage in the forest. However, Aurelia did not express any obvious objection, which gave Duque a new idea. "Respected Mage Norton, may I ask, if I give you a copy of this introductory handbook for a High Elf Mage Apprentice, how many things can I exchange for, including 2 sets of Stormwind City Magic Academy Apprentice Handbook?" "Well, about a month. After a month, I also hope to get a translation of the common language." Old Norton was stunned. From the 2 innocent and ecstatic faces beside him, the old man knew that Duque had succeeded. Damn it, it was not a transfer but just lending it to him once, and he wanted to receive benefits. Not only that, he even caught him to be a translator. This kid is very shrewd. Alright, whether it was official or private, he could not cheat Duque. "You win, kid." Old Norton shrugged helplessly. "You will get what you want. Since you are pleasing to the eye, I will give you 20% more than the market price. As for the specifics, I will slowly calculate it for you when we get there." The old man's promise made Duque see a golden thigh that was slowly rising to the top. It took 3 days to get from Northshire Abbey to Stormwind City. This was something that Duque only found out after he set off. Even though the geography of this world was basically the same as the world in the game, the geographical area was definitely magnified by who knew how many times. That night, Duque was attacked. He woke up to a pain in his ear, and when he opened his eyes he was almost scared to death. Because what he saw was not the top of the tent, but the inexplicable bright starry sky. The next moment he saw the familiar green inner armor of Mount Hyjal, and he was relieved. The High Elves were a very sensitive race. How can you recognize people based on their breasts?" Aurelia cursed in a low voice. "I'm only this tall." "Right." Duque found out bitterly that although he had transmigrated, his body was still his. But perhaps because he was only 13 years old after transmigrating, his body had shrunk. As he had not yet started puberty, he looked over at Aurelia, and the position of her breasts was just right. Aurelia gritted her teeth in anger, but she could not discuss such a useless topic with a child. Let me ask you, why did you lend the High Elves Apprentice Handbook that I gave you to that old man? So it was because of this. Duque had thought that Aurelia had come to question him for something so important. Shrugging, Duque looked helpless. Can't help it. Aurelia thought about it and it seemed to be the case. She put her hands on her hips and stared at Duque for a long time before her attitude finally softened. All right, you pass. Then, you dragged me out in the middle of the night for this? I came to say goodbye. Chapter 17. Huh. Didn't you say that your vacation was a year long? The trolls near Kuel Salis are acting strangely. Those cowardly old men sent an urgent order to transfer me back. They had not known each other for long, so Duque was still very grateful to Aurelia. Suddenly hearing that this golden coattail was about to leave, Duque still felt a little disappointed. Then I wish you a safe journey. Aurelia was stunned. The phrase safe journey was definitely the best wish for a windrunner. Unknowingly, Duque had warmed her frustrated heart. All right, you've unintentionally coaxed me again. Let me tell you something small. If you're in trouble, go find him. With that, Aurelia threw a small item over. Duque caught it and saw that it was a small silver accessory with a name engraved in the High Elves language. I don't know the High Elves language, Duque said bitterly. Then learn it. Even though I'm a windrunner and come from a family of rangers who have been roaming the forest for generations, I still have to say that the High Elves' magic is the most powerful magic. The pride of the High Elves was on full display at this moment. Aurelia puffed out her chest proudly. All right, you have the biggest chest, you have the final say. Yes, yes, yes. Duque did not refute. After all, the High Elves were the ones who played magic in Azeroth. Hey, why do you look like you want to send me away? No, 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 how is that possible? Duque hurriedly cried out. Sigh. Aurelia suddenly jumped onto a tree. Her left hand supported her right elbow and her right hand supported her chin. She sat on a branch and looked at Duque. He suddenly changed the topic. Actually, I envy you. You're young, energetic, and not afraid of power. Unlike me, I'm a ranger general, but in front of those counselors, I'm afraid my status is lower than a magic construct without self-awareness. So when I saw you slap that noble young master, I was very happy. Hey. As expected, you still peeped. I would think if only I had the courage to slap those bastard counselors a few times. Unfortunately, I can't do it. I'm the eldest daughter of the Windrunner family. Not only do I have to be a role model for my sisters, but I also have to represent the face of the Windrunner family. My every move will be magnified infinitely. Suddenly hearing Aurelia's bitter confession, Duque fell silent. So, the curious me you see is definitely not the usual me. When I return this time, I would once again be the serious and unsmiling Ranger General. Of course, it is precisely because Kuel Salis and Stormwind are so far apart that we will most likely not have the chance to meet again in this lifetime that I am telling you all this. Seriously, I want to thank you. At least for the past 2 days, you've made me feel interesting and happy. Duque suddenly smiled and asked tentatively, then, are we friends? Aurelia shook her head. No, the High Elves are not interested in being friends with humans. It should be said that we all avoid being friends with humans. Because compared to the infinite life of the High Elves, the lifespan of humans is too short. A human's lifespan of a few decades is like a nap for us. We would not be able to bear the sudden separation of life and death so soon after we have invested our feelings. Duque sighed in his heart. Sure enough, different races have different values. But Duque smiled mysteriously. But I have a feeling that I will see you again in 5 years. 5 years? Impossible. Those terrible old men will order me around. I have been on duty at the front line for no less than 50 years. Our front line will not allow humans to come close. Then let's make a bet. If we meet again in 5 years, at that time, you will swear to be my friend. For some reason, Duque secretly added the word woman in front of the word friend in his heart. Let's bet. Aurelia did not believe in a scammer. She crossed her arms in front of her chest as if she was looking at a little guy daydreaming. While to her, Duque was just a lecherous little guy. Aurelia left. At this moment in her heart, this human boy Duque was just a passerby. She did not expect that she would be tricked by Duque. If Duque's calculations were correct, then in 5 years the dark portal incident would break out and she, Aurelia, as a member of the Alliance, would once again come to the human world to resist the invasion of the orcs. The next morning, Duque was on his way again. He spent the next 2 days in the carriage. Sitting in the carriage, his body constantly bumping along with the carriage, Duque found that he had already begun to adapt to the world of Azeroth. From the beginning when he first sat in the carriage to the feeling of vomiting, he was now used to it. But what made Duque even more emotional was what happened on the road. Even the most peaceful elven forest is not a place that ordinary people can cross alone. The carriage team was attacked. Old Man Norton did not take the 3 apprentices on the road alone. Accompanying him was his magic apprentice, Xianxia, and a fully armed guard of 16 people. Including the coachman and servants, there were more than 20 people, 3 carriages and nearly 30 horses. Even with such a seemingly luxurious lineup, Duque was still attacked. On the second night, they were attacked by hundreds of forest wolves, but Old Man Norton chased them away with a few firewalls. On the third night they were attacked by gnolls. These wolf-headed monsters, only half the height of an adult human, were much more ferocious than the ones Duque encountered in the game. These cunning and ferocious predators would not only launch sneak attacks at night, but they would also come in groups. Armed with crossbows, they would crawl in the grass and shoot arrows, attempting to disrupt the defense of the convoy and then encircle and annihilate them. Duque, who was protected by 6 shield-wielding guards, saw with his own eyes a servant not far from him get shot in the neck by a crude crossbow. Looking at the dying face, the mouth that was spitting out blood bubbles still struggled to open and close. Duque, who thought that he was beginning to adapt to the world of Azeroth, felt uncomfortable and suffocated again. Death, even if he knew that he could try it many times, he would never get used to it. Recovering 1% of his humanity in Northshire Abbey made Duque happy. But he still felt that it was not a simple method. It was still a time of peace. Once war came, then. Don't lose your integrity too quickly. Beside Duque, Darnielle and Itana seemed very normal. When Duque asked them, the answer he got was, "In this world full of monsters, dead people are very common." Duque was a little speechless. The only fortunate thing was that they finally arrived at Stormwind City on the evening of the 3rd day. Chapter 18. Stormwind City was a little different from what Duque had imagined. In the game, Stormwind City had huge white walls, majestic and grand music as soon as one entered the city gates, and complemented by the statues of the 5 heroes that were full of explosive power on both sides of the road. The first impression it gave people was explosive. However, the current Stormwind City gave Duque the feeling that it was ordinary. The 24-foot city wall obviously lacked repair, and Duque could see some cracks on the wall. The tall watchtowers had large pieces of the outer wall peeling off, and it was doubtful how long these watchtowers could withstand the attack of the catapults. As a mage, he naturally had special privileges. There was no need to follow the long queue of people to enter the city, and the convoy directly entered from the other side of the gate. After entering from the huge city gate, Duque did not find the huge lake that acted as a moat behind the city wall, nor did he find the inner city wall. Seeing this, Duque could not help but laugh. For the current Stormwind City, it had been almost 1,000 years since they had encountered an external enemy. Scattered monsters could not threaten the heart of this human kingdom at all. Fortunately, the warriors of Stormwind City still had strong combat power under the training of Anduin Lothar, or else Stormwind would just be a huge flashy shell. Even so, Stormwind could only be considered a giant in deep sleep, completely unaware that its hands and feet had been rotted by something called nobility. Only under the trial of blood and fire did Stormwind, which was almost completely destroyed, welcome a new life after the First Orc War. Thinking that such a huge human city was about to be destroyed in the flames of war, the feeling of being the only sober person in a drunken stupor did not feel good. On the side, the 2 guys who had not seen the world, Darnielle and Itana, had their mouths wide open, so wide that an egg could be put in their mouths. The 3 of them had such different reactions which made Old Man Norton feel very funny. He asked Duque, "What's wrong? Did Stormwind City disappoint you?" "Oh, yes. My impression of Stormwind City is that it has a 50-foot tall white outer wall with a golden-edged blue background insignia of the Alliance hanging all over it. Inside the outer wall, there is a 100-foot wide inner lake that acts as a moat." Duque used the standard length units of this world to describe the Stormwind City in the game. However, he did not know that at this moment, an important figure patrolling the city wall had unconsciously heard all of this. When this great figure turned his head and scanned the terrain within the city wall, he revealed a thoughtful expression. The carriage drove through the bustling streets, and after getting rid of the hustle and bustle of the trade district, the convoy quickly crossed a small river and entered the Mage district where the Royal Magic Academy was located. As soon as he crossed the bridge, Duque heard an explosion. Another explosion? This time it's Wizard Baral's laboratory. Damn it! We should build a tall wall. The citizens of the trade district are scared out of their wits. Through the window of the carriage, Duque saw the guards of Stormwind City allocating people out of habit. Some maintained order, some went to extinguish the fire, and a few ran to the church square to call for priests who knew healing spells to save the situation. You'll get used to it. Old Man Norton was also embarrassed. Duque suddenly felt that mages were a group of weirdos who were walking further and further down the road of death. Alright, thinking that he would soon be one of these weirdos, Duque suddenly did not feel good. Luckily, this world still has the great goblin engineering to block the bullets. Duque muttered to himself. Yes, the mechanical products that often caused explosions were those little green-skinned people that were only as tall as a human's thigh. It was very different from the game. In this timeline there was a huge magic academy in Stormwind City. It was 10 meters tall, inlaid with fine gold patterns made of iron. It was even more awesome than the doors of many universities in Duque's previous world. On the square made of pure white marble tiles, Old Man Norton was the first to get off the carriage. Alright, young lads and ladies, we're here. The old man pointed to a building that looked like a library at the side of the square. Go in and report. Your information has been sent ahead of time. There will be a troublesome dormitory manager who will play a little game with you. If you win, you'll receive additional rewards. That's all I can say. Good luck. The old man rolled his eyes. As for you, Duque, after arranging the dormitory, come to my laboratory. It's about the things you exchanged with me. Alright, Sir Wizard Norton. When there were outsiders, Duque had to be polite to the old man. After all, the old man's qualifications and identity were there. Stepping onto the 9 steps, Duque and the other 2 entered the library. They didn't see anyone. Instead, there was no one in the huge and empty hall. The huge glass ball hanging from the ceiling emitted a soft light that was brighter than candlelight. This made Duque think of energy-saving lamps or something. Here. Duque and the other 2 were startled, especially the timid Aitana, who let out a scream. Because the oil paintings on the walls of the hall moved. The people in the paintings were waving at Duque and the others. It was obvious that all the paintings were of the same guy with a brown hood whose face could not be seen. Hello, I'm the dormitory manager of the Royal Magic Academy, Raven. I'm a harmless ghost. I think the mage who brought you here should have told you about me. Duque and the other 2 shook their heads like a rattle drum. Didn't he? Oh my god. Who's leading the team? What kind of guy is this? He actually made me almost scare my cute juniors. It wasn't almost, it was already frightening. Duque clearly felt that Aitana's 10 little fingers had already grabbed his left arm like iron hooks. It made his left arm hurt. Alright, if you're scared then so be it. Anyway, this is the Royal Magic Academy, not the library. Such a cowardly guy is only fit to be a librarian. Having said that, he waved his hand and the 3 young people were involuntarily sucked into 3 different oil paintings. Feeling dazed, just like when he crossed over, the jolting feeling of crossing through space made Duque extremely uncomfortable. When he came back to his senses, Duque found himself in a void. Around him were twinkling stars, and in front of him was a huge chessboard big enough for Duque to do 18 forward somersaults, and then 36 side somersaults without falling. The black and white squares indicated that this was a standard chessboard. But the things on the chessboard were special. They were neatly arranged on both sides, each about the height of 2 people. On the left was the human-looking alliance and on the right was the horde of orcs. Duque suddenly remembered a checkpoint in the game, the Guardian Mediva's old nest, Karazhan, the chess checkpoint. Chapter 19. At this moment the system genie suddenly ran out. Dear host, harmless illusion and unknown rule detected. Do you need me to filter it for you? Harmless illusion. Filter. Duque answered decisively. The scene in front of him changed. What appeared in front of Duque was still a chessboard and a large pile of chess pieces. But the shape of each chess piece had completely changed, turning into a lifelike matchstick human-like body frame. What if I don't filter it? The scene in front of him changed again, turning into the Khorasan chess that Duque was most familiar with. On Duque's side, in front of him was a row of Stormwind City guards, fully armed and brightly armored. The blue tassel and the blue shield with a golden lion head pattern gave Duque an inexplicable sense of heroism. Wow, it can change according to my imagination. This kind of extremely fantastical illusion was not something that the immature 3D game technology from before he transmigrated could compare to. After seeing through it, Duque was not as shocked as he had been at the beginning. Instead, he became a little more excited. There were a total of 6 types of chess pieces, although they were still divided into alliance and horde according to Duque's imagination. For some reason, the setting was different from the Khorasan chess stage in the game. The first type was soldiers, which filled the entire front row. On the alliance's side were Stormwind City soldiers, while their counterpart was the armored horde infantry. The second type was horses, 2 on each side. The alliances were heavily armored knights riding fully armored war horses, while the hordes were wolf knights wielding huge spiked maces. The third type was phase, 2 on each side. The alliance had 2 ice mages while the horde had 2 apocalypse mages. The fourth type was warriors, 2 on each side. The alliance had 2 priests who could heal while the horde had shamans. The fifth type was a little strange. On the alliance's side was the guardian of Azeroth, Stormwind's chief court archmage Medivh, while the horde's pharaoh's face was a blur. The sixth type was speechless king. The alliance's was King Lang, who wore heavy silver armor and held a giant hammer. The horde's was the horde chief Blackhand, who held an axe. At this moment, the guy who called himself Raven spoke. Hee. Little guy, are you scared? Duque pursed his lips. No, I'm already scared. I don't think you look frightened. Right. Don't take this little game to heart, it's just a little prank of mine. Of course, your performance in this game will directly affect your status and living conditions in the Royal Magic Academy. So if it's possible, I hope you can give it your all. From the sound of it, Raven was saying that he would use his position as the dormitory's administrator to give Duque some benefits. But there were too many traps hidden here. Duque didn't expose him. A mysterious smile appeared at the corner of his mouth. That's good. I don't think you want me to play a normal game of chess with you, right? Do you have any special playstyles unique to mages? Show us. Raven's face was almost entirely covered by the shadow of his hood. Only his chin could be seen and there was a knowing smile on his face. This is a magic school. Those idiots who are playing normal chess with my friends will be living next to the toilet for the next year. Well, that's a shame. Please allow Duque to observe a moment of silence for those idiots. Alright, what you're seeing is the ultimate version. First, you have to prove that you are qualified to be a chess piece on this chessboard. In Duque's vision, a huge golden scroll opened up. There were many spells written in the common language. And on top of the scroll, a huge hourglass appeared out of nowhere. The meaning was self-evident. When the hourglass ends, the scroll will close. Almost immediately, Duque let the system elf do its work. System elf, analyze immediately. Record. Understood, my host. Beep. After preliminary inspection, this is the simplified spell model of Enhance Intelligence, Frost Arrow, and Blizzard. Copying the spell model. Spell model recorded, deducing the complete spell formula in reverse. Duque immediately realized that this was a great opportunity. From the looks of it, this seemed like a game, but it was actually an entrance test. The test did not focus on how strong the apprentice was or how many spells they could master. In fact, they wanted to see how strong the apprentice's adaptability was. Although this method of using spells was like handing a gun to the apprentice, and the apprentice only had to pull the trigger, being able to pull the trigger did not mean being able to hit the target, and being able to hit the target did not mean being able to hit the effective spot. Even if the target was hit, it still depended on the timing, the method, and the effect. How to use it, all tested the apprentice's adaptability to the elements, imagination, and understanding of magic. It was not an exaggeration to say that this was a comprehensive test of magic. To most of the apprentices, the sand in the hourglass was billions of times more precious than gold. Many of them also realized that this was a great opportunity to obtain spells for free. Even if it was a simplified version, it would make their future path of magic much smoother. Every student stared at the scroll greedily. Only Duque was the most special one. He only glanced at the entire scroll that was half the height of a person, then lowered his head and fell into deep thought. Only he knew that he was not deep in thought at all, but was suffering the bombardment of information from the system elf. Discovered spell model, intelligence increase. It can temporarily top up your IQ that is in arrears, allowing your poor brain to temporarily load more spell models. Rejoice. 2 points of intelligence from level 1, increase intelligence, can temporarily increase your mana by 20 points, temporarily reaching the minimum intelligence requirement to master Blizzard. Frost Arrow. Young man, do you want your opponent to eat popsicles made from your foot-washing water? Level 1 Frost Arrow. Can completely satisfy your needs. Blizzard. Do you want your opponent to be confused in the cold wind? Do you want your opponent to be frozen into a snowflake in the hot summer? Level 1 Blizzard. You deserve it. Looking at the first few sentences that were like advertising slogans for a moment, Duque had the urge to let the system elf broadcast him eating *T. What the hell is this? Come on. Don't use this kind of tone to explain spells to me, okay? Oh, that's too bad. I extracted this way of describing it from the information in your brain. This way of speaking obviously accounts for 70% of your daily conversations. I think you will like it. Why are you complaining about me? The system elf used the most serious tone to refute Duque. Alright. Duque was defeated. Chapter 20. But what was even more unbearable was yet to come. It wasn't words but a pure system prompt. Detected, fluid mechanics, and introduction to HVAC. Reading thermodynamic knowledge. The so-called air conditioning is the process of moving heat from one space to another. Optimizing spell model. Optimization complete. When you fire Frost Arrow, you can extract the heat between you and the target in advance by extracting the fire element, creating an ice channel suitable for the passage of freezing energy. You have acquired the super magic ability, Track of Ice, of the elemental spell category. The power of your shooting ice spell is increased by 33%, and the flying speed of your Frost Arrow is increased by 45%. If you want to acquire more abilities, please provide the system with more reference data. According to the detected knowledge, you have changed the scattering mode of Blizzard. Your Blizzard spell has acquired a special mode. The attack radius is increased by 40%, and the power is reduced by 20%. Like an old-fashioned phone that received 1,000 text messages in one go, the neon green text that popped up on his retina almost drove Duque crazy. A lot of knowledge was forcibly instilled into his brain, whether it was the knowledge of spells after his transmigration, or the knowledge he had learned in college before his transmigration, but had been forgotten. The so-called college for a college animal like Duque was just a place to play games. Exams and whatnot were just things to retake the course for 3 days before the exam, and then forget all about it after the exam. He never thought that the knowledge that should have been forgotten by him would be perfectly invoked by the system elf at this moment. It turned out that these things that seemed to have been forgotten were actually still stored in his brain. Just as Duque was meditating, the sand in the hourglass had unknowingly leaked out. The scene in front of him changed. Duque suddenly found that he was on a chessboard, but the chessboard had been magnified several times, and he was only standing on the edge of a white square. And at the other end of the square 3 meters away stood a young mage apprentice with a common face. Seeing the appearance of the other party, Duque immediately realized that this guy was his opponent. As if taking care of the novice Duque, the other party began to hold back his Frost Arrow. Please forgive Duque for using the word hold to describe his opponent. That guy really looked like he was constipated and couldn't hold it in no matter what. Successfully releasing a spell wasn't a simple matter. In addition to the corresponding incantation, a standard casting process also required the transfer of mana within one's body to communicate with the corresponding elemental world and attract the corresponding amount of energy. Then he molded this energy into a suitable form and released it. Even though this process had been specially simplified, as long as one's spiritual energy was enough to communicate with the element's realm and attract enough element energy, it would automatically stop absorbing and shape the energy. However, it was still very difficult for an apprentice who knew nothing about magic to complete this task. Therefore, it was understandable that the other party purposely gave Duque time. Duque didn't appreciate it. With the help of the system elf, Duque already knew that if the opponent was a real mage apprentice, then this fellow had already failed to cast a spell for the third time in 2 short seconds. He failed to communicate with the element's realm for the first 2 times and absorbed too little element energy for the third time. That bit of ice energy wasn't even enough to make a popsicle. Duque sent him on his way. He stepped forward, left uppercut, right uppercut, and finished. In the Magic Academy, a dozen powerful mages who were watching the battle in front of a huge oil painting showing Duque's battle were dumbfounded. Looking at Duque, who had beaten his opponent into a pig's head with his fists, the entire place was deathly silent. After a while someone spoke. This is a blasphemy to the Magic Academy. An old mage waved his fists angrily. Norton, this is the student you picked and claimed to be the most talented among this batch of mage apprentices? Old man Norton was just about to say something when suddenly, a voice was heard. No. Duke Marcus made the right choice. You've been protected by close combat followers for a long time. Perhaps this made you forget one thing. When a mage doesn't pull away, using a spell that takes too long to cast against an enemy is an extremely dangerous action. The old mage was silent. In the second round, Duque's opponent was obviously more than 1 level higher. Under Raven's control, the opponent could already fully release a Frost Arrow spell, and the distance between the two had increased from 3 meters to 10 meters. However, this was still not difficult for Duque, because the opponent's casting time was as long as 8 seconds. It was enough for Duque to tease him as he jogged in front of his opponent, easily dodging his opponent's attack. It couldn't be helped. Looking at the obviously obvious throwing posture, Duque dodged it with a sidestep. Then Duque used his fists to teach the guy a lesson. In front of the oil painting, the old mage looked at the mage who had spoken up for Duque. How are you going to explain this time? The opponent was not angry. No matter how strong a spell is, it's useless if it can't hit the enemy. The opponent's words made sense. The old mage was actually speechless. However, even though the opponent's casting speed was increasing in the 3rd, 4th, and 5th round, when Duque used the same method to deal with them, not only the old mage but a few other mages expressed their dissatisfaction. Hey! We're recruiting mage apprentices now. This is not a mock battle between a mage and a thief. When the mage was almost unable to defend Duque, Duque made his move in the 6th round. Level 1. Frost Arrow. Extremely effective. Amateurs enjoyed the show while experts appreciated the artistry. It was clearly an ordinary Frost Arrow spell model, so why was the Frost Arrow face Frost Arrow so terrifying? In the eyes of most official mages, it was already amazing that Duque was able to cast a flying block of ice. At the very least, this was enough to be called excellent. The difficulty of understanding and using a simplified spell model in such a short time was only known to the mages who had tried it before. Which of the old mages here did not practice thousands of times to experience the power of the elements and only throw a small piece of ice? But what was Duque's Frost Arrow? Fast, accurate, ruthless. Not only was its flying speed comparable to the speed of an arrow shot from a powerful bow, it even struck the other party's forehead in a straight line. The moment the ice arrow struck the bridge of the nose, it suddenly split into 2 pieces and fiercely pierced into the other party's eyeballs. Perhaps Duque's Frost Arrow was not powerful enough to kill an adult, but Duque added pure elemental damage to physical damage. If the opponent was a real person, then he would have been killed by Duque. Hiss. In the entire room watching Duque's trial, the dozen or so mages all gasped. There was only one word in their minds: genius. Chapter 21. Genius. An absolute genius. Without a doubt, he was a once-in-a-thousand-years genius. Even Mediva's disciple Khadgar did not show such shocking talent at the tender age of 13 or 14. The only one who could match Duque's talent was probably the current world guardian, Mediv. But who was Mediv? His mother was Aegwyn, the strongest protector of the Tirisful Council, which was formed by the Dalagens Megaculus Council and the High Elf Silver Moon Council in Cule Salis in secret to prevent disasters and destruction in the world. Even his father, Nyalos Aaron, who was rarely mentioned, was a famous court mage of Stormwind City. He was a classic example of a good seedling. But Duque, a brat who came from God knows where, actually had such shocking talent. This made the mages go crazy. In the world of mages, other than those mage families that could cultivate mages for generations, most mages were classified by a certain school of mage inheritance. For the Stormwind City Royal Magic Academy, which accepted disciples in the human world and even in the High Elves' kingdom of Kuel Salis, the origin was not important. There were too few good seedlings among the human mages. If he became Duque's master, wouldn't he have the chance to train a court mage? Mages were never a single individual. Every mage often had their own followers, their own fiefdom, and their own forces to ensure that they could obtain enough resources for advancement and the expenses needed for magic experiments. Many mages who were on good terms with the Brando family immediately threw the request of the Brando family to the back of their minds when they saw this scene. Snatch. They must snatch. Whoever snatched Duque as their disciple could possibly soar to the sky in one fell swoop. Duque's performance in the 7th stage stimulated the mages to the point that their eyes turned red. What did Duque do? He actually wandered around the periphery of the opponent's blizzard, and while the blizzard was throwing ice shards down, he killed his opponent with a frost arrow, in between the hailstones. All 7 stages passed. There was no sloppiness in his victory. Just as a large group of mages in the observation room were about to leave to meet Duque, the genius that appeared once in 1,000 years, they suddenly realized that Duque had entered the 8th stage. What? Aren't there only 7 stages? Every mage was stunned. In the next second they all thought of a possibility. Duque was a little dumbfounded by the changes in the scene before him. After 7 consecutive one-on-one matches, he had almost forgotten about the Karazhan chess. The chessboard was no longer a chessboard. In the eyes of the other mages, Thoradin the Great was commanding the human alliance with the earthy tribe as the core to fight against the Northern Troll Empire. But what entered Duque's vision was the prairie at dusk. The 2 armies confronted each other. The grassland was filled with the heavy breathing of the human soldiers, the neighing of the horses, and the deep growls of the huge black-furred wargs. Both sides were like 2 giant beasts that were about to fight to the death on the grassland. Just the sense of battle was enough to make any rookie on the battlefield wet his pants in fear. The setting sun passed over the hills in the distance and poured down on the grassland. The sky and earth were orange, as if they were about to witness the blood that was spilled on this land. Not far from Duque, the king of Stormwind City, Lang's short golden hair was extremely dazzling under the setting sun. Lang was the center of this battlefield. As long as Lang was killed, the Horde would obtain complete victory. On the other hand, if the Horde's Black Hand chief was killed, it would be the Alliance's victory. Duque's head followed Lang's line of sight into the distance, and his eyes reflected the formation of both sides. In front of him was no longer a simple chessboard but a real battlefield. The voice of Stormwind City's commander, Lothar, echoed in his ears. Lothar, who was beside Lang, waved his hand and roared with power. Prepare for battle. The first battle line form a shield formation. Baros, Giajasha move the cavalry on both sides. Prepare to counterattack the wolf riders. The nobles of Stormwind City were rotten, but it had to be said that under the guidance of the great Lothar, the Stormwind City guards were one of the strongest armies in the human kingdom. The soldiers' performance was impeccable. Facing the orc soldiers who were easily 2 heads taller than them, they did not panic at all. It was as if they had moved in an instant. The first row of soldiers forcefully inserted the tip of their big shields into the ground under their feet, and then the second row of soldiers placed their big shields above the first row of shields. The third and fourth rows of spearmen leveled their long spears, and with a soft clatter, 2 rows of shining spears appeared outside the shield formation. No matter who it was, if they wanted to attack such a formation, they would undoubtedly pay a heavy price. 5 minutes. Only 5 minutes. In Duque's vision, an extremely strict battle line had already appeared in front of him. Warriors. King Lang raised the warhammer in his hand high. Have you ever been willing to let the dirty enemy gallop on the land of Stormwind? But the arrival of the enemy has made war inevitable. Behind you is your home, Stormwind City. Many of you may die here, but your loved ones, your compatriots, will survive because of your fighting. But if we win, then from now on, in the land of the Eastern Kingdom, in every tavern, in every old man's mouth, our name will be sung for generations to come. For the Alliance, fight. With Lang's shout, the morale of the soldiers suddenly reached its peak. Fight, thousands of voices and thousands of wills converged into one. Even though Duque knew that this scene was illusory, it still made Duque's emotions surge. At this time, Duque suddenly saw Anduin Lothar walking over. This incomparably handsome, attractive man with a charming beard and a square face patted Duque's shoulder and smiled. I'll leave the magic support to you. I think with you Stormwind City will not fall into a disadvantage in the magic war. With you. For some reason a warm feeling rose in Duque's heart. Even though he knew that this was an illusion, even though he knew that this Lothar was fake, Duque still felt a sense of need and recognition. All right. Leave it to me. Behind Duque, a young mage who looked like a high-level mage walked forward and said to Duque, Dear Great Mage, the Stormwind City Mage Squad will act according to your instructions. Wherever your magic goes, the Mage Squad's attack will follow. This is similar to the Archer Squads leading the shot? Duque smiled. Then the Stormwind City army could not smile. Because they were at an absolute disadvantage in the battle of magic. The Horde Warlocks on the opposite side constantly used Meteor Fire Shower to teach the Stormwind City soldiers how to behave. And Duque's mage squad was like drunkards fighting randomly. No one knew what they were doing. Chapter 22. The warriors of Stormwind City were still brave and fighting, but because of Duque's lack of support, they fell into a passive situation. The three groups of mages had no idea what they were doing. Not only did his colleagues in the scene cast puzzled and angry looks, but even the mages who were watching the battle outside the field sighed. They were disappointed. Duque's magical aura seemed to disappear in an instant. Old man Norton seemed to be talking to himself. Sure enough, no matter how talented you are, you can't make up for the gap in experience. However, at this time, a faint smile appeared at the corner of Duque's mouth. I suddenly feel like I'm very bad. Yes. Just when the opponent was about to enjoy the joy of victory, he kicked the opponent from the clouds of happiness full of hope for victory into the bottomless abyss of despair. This kind of evil pleasure, not to mention the first time, even if it happened countless times, it would still make Duque feel good. He didn't know how many of the spectators outside the field would drop their glasses. He only knew that his frost arrow had appeared in the most appropriate place on the entire battlefield. Because they were unscrupulous, because they felt that the mages on Stormwind City's side were weak enough, the overall formation of the horde was unknowingly pressuring them. The Black Hand Chief waved his battle axe at the front line and killed everyone. With every sweep of the battle axe, there were multiple Stormwind City warriors who died on the spot. As a result, the shaman who was healing the chief's injuries and restoring his health had unknowingly walked very close to the front line. Even if the head of the shaman group had carefully calculated the range of Duque's mages, that was the range of ordinary mages, not Duque. This was a trial but also a game. Since the mage group's range was set to be equal to Duque's range, then the mages could hit as far as Duque could hit. Metamagic ability, Track of Ice, activated. At the same time, Duque also had the system elf help adjust a metamagic ability, Spell Extension, which was similar to the mage talent, Cold Extension in the game. Of course, the effect was not as good as a specialized talent. However, with the aid of the enhancement circle specially used for war, even the smallest increase in a mage's power would be magnified many times over. The warriors of Stormwind City and the Horde, who were fighting desperately in despair, stopped at the same time. They saw a cluster of snow-white light that looked like a falling meteor piercing through the sky, streaking across the battlefield and accurately falling into the middle of the tribe's group of priests. Under Duque's attack, the chief priest of the priest squad had a huge hole opened up in his chest. In the next instant, the frightening bloody hole was sealed by the ice, and the chief priest died before he even had the chance to use heal. Following closely behind Duque's attack, more and more icy meteors pierced through the void and fell on the heads of the shaman priest group. There was a series of continuous sounds similar to glass shattering, and it was as if a white crystal rain was falling on the heads of the shaman priests. Countless bone-chilling ice crystal fragments poured down like a storm, covering the prairie with a layer of frost. The pure ice rain, stained with the red of blood, became incomparably enchanting. An entire tribe's shaman priest group was completely annihilated. Without giving the tribe a chance to react, the second round of attack came. After a mere 5 seconds, the remaining shaman priest group of the other tribe was immediately annihilated. At this moment, the entire horde army had lost their healers. All of their injuries could not be healed. On the side of Stormwind City, although the number of soldiers was slightly smaller, each of them was like a cockroach that could not be killed. Other than those with broken arms and legs, even if it was a huge wound the size of a fist, with the treatment of the priests, the injury would quickly heal. The scales of war that were already tilted towards the tribe were instantly pulled back. At this moment, even if the mages watching the battle were stupid, they knew that this was not a counterattack by Duque to regain the advantage. It was a premeditated plan to lure the enemy in and kill them in one blow. Hiss, the mages once again gasped. Monster. Absolute monster. Not only was his magic talent amazing, but his battle sense was also so sharp. The biggest difference between the mages of Stormwind City and the mages of the Dalajan was that the mages of Stormwind City served the royal family, served the war. Although in the past hundreds of years Stormwind City had not experienced a large-scale war, how to coordinate the mages with the regular soldiers had always been the focus of the Royal Magic Academy's research. Duque's performance seemed to have opened a new window for these rigid old mages. For a moment the observation room was dead silent. On the other side the test was over. The Black Hand Chief, who had lost the support of the priests, became a trapped beast. The result, of course, was a great victory for the Stormwind City's frontline army. It's over? Originally, Duque thought there would be a 9th round or something. I haven't played enough yet. In front of him, the administrator Raven, who appeared again, laughed dryly. Little guy, no need to pretend. You already knew that this was not some dormitory trial. Don't worry, little guy, you will receive additional rewards. Hehe. The scene changed again. When Duque came back to his senses, he suddenly found himself in a magnificent hall. The hall was like a buffet. Many people dressed like apprentices had arrived early and gathered in 2s and 3s. Some of the apprentices hungrily picked up the pastries on the table and ate them. Duque saw Darnielle and Itana. Duque, over here. Darnielle enthusiastically called out to Duque. Unexpectedly, as soon as he shouted, everyone's attention fell on Duque. They all looked at him with bad intentions. Did I do something wrong? Darnielle was not too slow. He immediately realized that something was wrong. No, you did nothing wrong. Duque stepped forward, raised his arm slightly and patted Darnielle's shoulder. Yes. You're the one who's wrong, Duke Marcus. Wizard Norton must have made a mistake somewhere. You can't be a grade 9 talent. At this moment, a strict and irrefutable voice sounded. Duque's eyes sharpened and he glanced at the newcomer. It was a well-dressed golden-haired boy of about 14 or 15 years of age from a wealthy family. His hair was well combed, all combed to the back of his head. Just a pretty boy. Didn't your mother teach you not to interrupt? Don't you know the basic etiquette of saying your name before talking to a stranger? Duque's rebuttal caused the boy's face to turn red and green. However, his good upbringing made him calm. I am Philly Gendel of the Gendel family in Rapidflow Castle. As a direct descendant of the Gendel family with 1,000 years of magic inheritance, I am only a grade 7 apprentice. I have deep doubts about your grade 9 talent. Suddenly a voice sounded, no need to doubt. In the 6th round, Duke Marcus defeated you with an absolute advantage. A stone stirred up 1,000 ripples. At first, everyone thought that it was just a simulated battle with a virtual character set up by the Academy. Who would have thought that it was a battle between wizards that was synchronized with a real person? No apprentice dared to doubt the words of the newcomer. Although he was a little too young, the illustrious royal crest on his body told them that he was a court wizard of Stormwind. The court wizard came in front of Duque. Hello, Duke Marcus. I am the court wizard Mediv. Are you interested in becoming my disciple? Duque replied almost without thinking, I refuse. Chapter 23. At this moment Mediv was not the bearded uncle. He was younger and more handsome. He had a pair of deep blue eyes that seemed to be able to see through the past and future of the world. He was calm and full of mysterious charm. His brown, flaxen, shoulder-length wavy hair made him look like an artist. Coupled with his well-built body, he looked like a handsome man. As the protector of Stormwind and even the world of Azeroth, as the childhood best friend of the Stormwind King Lang, as the court archmage of Stormwind City, Mediva's position was extremely high. Moreover, he did not often appear in Stormwind City. Most of the time he would be doing experiments and research in the Karazhan Mage Tower in the Upwind Path, far to the southeast of Stormwind City. As long as he appeared, who would not give him face? But Duque did it. If Duque receiving Mediva's favor had attracted the envy and jealousy of the apprentices and even the mages, then at this moment, all the gazes towards Duque had become the same, mockery. Kid, do you know who you just rejected? Mediv. The world's strongest mage, the protector of Azeroth, Mediv. Kid, even if it's because of your ignorance, this is too much. There were all sorts of noises around them, but Mediv raised his hand and all the noises disappeared in an instant. Mediv was not angry. Instead he smiled and asked Duque. Kid Duque, are you sure you know who I am? Training under the most powerful mage was not an opportunity that every talented mage apprentice could have. I have been the protector of the world for so long, and I have only accepted one apprentice, Khadgar. If you don't know me well, I can explain to you what you can get by becoming my apprentice. No, I know who you are. But please allow me to reject, Duque said firmly. What a joke. Becoming Mediva's apprentice at this time? That would be courting death. That's right, anyone would think that becoming the disciple of the strongest mage in the world, Mediv, was a glorious thing. It was the highest honor for a mortal. If it was Azeroth, the other 9,999% of existences would immediately kneel down and lick his boots, shouting, Master, please accept this disciple's worship. However, in the world of Azeroth, only Duque, a veteran player, would seriously remember what Mediv had on him. In Duque's field of vision, Mediva's forehead had a huge pit carved into it. At this point in time, Mediv was the biggest trap in the world. There was no other. Why? Because Mediv had been possessed by Sargeras, the boss of the Burning Legion. He was possessed. He was possessed. He was possessed. This matter is very important, so I repeat it 3 times. Who was Sargeras? At the beginning of this world, a group of races with divine power, the Titans, formed the Pantheon and began their journey of creation. Sargeras was the Titan warrior who was responsible for defeating many evil creatures during the journey of creation. About 25,000 years ago, Sargeras betrayed the Pantheon Council and became the Demon King. He created the Burning Legion and began his burning crusade to destroy the experimental results of the other Titans. Sargeras was so arrogant that he easily destroyed one world after another, until he encountered the world of Azeroth. Here his demon army was resisted by the allied forces of the Pentashade dragons. The Burning Legion was defeated. After that, the forces of the demons made repeated attempts to conquer Azeroth, but they all failed. About 300 years ago, Mediva's mother, the previous world guardian Aegwynn, went to a place called Northrend to stop a group of demons who were hunting dragons, and then encountered Sargeras. She defeated the Demon King and sealed his body in an ancient night elf ruin, but she didn't realize that Sargeras' soul had lurked in her body. As she gave birth to Mediv, Sargeras' soul also sneaked into Mediva's body. After Mediv grew up, Sargeras almost completely controlled Mediv, so Mediv would appear to be neurotic from time to time. Only a few times did his own soul control his own body. It was no exaggeration to say that in the subsequent suffering in the world of Azeroth, the first and biggest boss was Mediv, who was standing in front of Duque. Duque never thought that his extremely outstanding performance would attract Mediv. If a few seconds ago he was still delusional that the world had changed, would Mediv be the 20% different or something had changed? The system elf said, detected an extremely evil and incomparably powerful demons while spying on you. Combat assessment, your chances of winning are infinitely close to 0. Please avoid it quickly. This made Duque hesitate no more and he decisively rejected it. Originally, the surrounding mages almost wanted to gang up on Duque, but Mediv once again raised his hand and made a silent gesture. Duke Marcus, right? Can I hear your reason? Duque's brain was spinning quickly. He knew that if he didn't give a suitable and reasonable reason, he was afraid that things would be very bad today. He already had a bad premonition that he would fall from the edge of the cliff into the bottomless abyss at any time. Respected Guardian Mediv. You are very great. Duque's opening speech slightly reduced the anger of the mages. But ever since I found out about my talent, My dream has been greater than greatness. Duque raised his head proudly as if he wanted to proclaim his youthful dreams. Huh. Mediva's face showed a slight surprise and then he smiled. Continue. Unknowingly, Duque's voice rose an octave, and his clear voice seemed to light up the entire hall. So, I was thinking if I became the disciple of you, the greatest mage Mediv, then, no matter what kind of great achievements I make in the future, no matter how many times I save the world in the eyes of the world, this is what it should be. Because I am the disciple of Guardian Mediv. The most outstanding disciple taught by a great teacher. Then I will forever live under your halo and people will only remember me as Mediva's disciple, Duque. And not the great mage Duke Marcus. The powerful and resonant words condensed Duque's realization. Realization as a transmigrator. This was the realization of a junior with a dream and a goal. Realization as a young man who longed to make a name for himself in a different world. If it was before his transmigration, if Duque said these words in class or on any social media, even if he did not win the applause of the whole hall, he would at least win a knowing smile from the elders. But here what Duque waited for was a thunderous roar. Presumptuous, that you're tuning in to the Zhou Xian's Legacy YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.